Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Chapter 395, Grand Opening. Meanwhile, in the nightly court in Angora City, a few of the squires and knights in training visited the Reborn department store to stock up on their chocolate bars. This had been their routine for the past few months. Train, eat chocolate, sleep. And just as they were about to enter the store, their eyes were suddenly drawn over to the poster right next to the glass display near the entrance. One teenage squire walked up to the poster and read its contents. Warning: do not go if you have a weak heart. The other squires were immediately interested when they heard that. What's that? They asked him. It's this poster. It looks like this roller coaster is a terrifying experience that only people with a brave heart should ride. Let me see that, one of the teens said, walking over towards the poster. And once he read it, he couldn't help but tilt his head in confusion. Why would this be scary? There's no monster or anything. And it even says here that it's completely safe. So why would people be scared? Yeah, I wouldn't be scared by that, one squire with glasses said confidently. His other friends laughed, not believing him. Bro, you're the one who blinks his eyes whenever a sword is about to hit you. You're not one to talk. Hee hee. I can't believe that the person with the weakest sword heart among us is acting like the bravest one here. The bespectacled teen pursed his lips, angry at his friend's teasing. I'm not scared. And I'll prove it. We'll all go to this roller coaster and see which one can last the longest. His friends laughed before nodding their heads. Deal. Meanwhile, in some other part of Angora City, a few people were having a conversation while staring at the poster on the wall. This roller coaster is in the parched lands? A gentleman said, surprised. I thought there was only a desolate desert out there. Another gentleman, his friend, quickly shook his head. Don't you know about the Reborn company? Of course I know them. Who doesn't? Well, their nation is located in the parched lands. I've never been there myself, but I have heard great things about it. They say that the stars land there in the night, the gentleman's friend said. They lowered the price on the taxi. Maybe I should go visit it with my family, said the gentleman. Great idea. I will do so as well. There were many such people like that in the Queen's region. Although they had heard about the Reborn company, the knowledge about the nation of Reborn wasn't all that spread out yet. After all, Michael hadn't really advertised their nation so publicly before. It was only now when he promoted the roller coaster did a lot of people finally know about their nation's existence. The fact that the advertisements for the roller coaster were so rampant in every part of the city made it hard for anyone not to know about it. Because of that, there were a lot of people who set out to the King's region to visit the nation of Reborn. The amount of people that took the Reborn taxis and buses was staggering. Almost half of the population in Angora City, the Grafted Cluster, and Neo-Orcus migrated out towards the parched lands. Once again, a lot of companies were in complete awe and amazement at the Reborn company's ingenious methods of business. This was the first time anyone had ever used such a widespread advertisement. They never knew how effective it was. Eventually, the next day finally came and the roller coaster could finally be opened to the public. Michael woke up early in the morning and transported himself to the parched lands. And as he floated in the air above the nation, he immediately saw the large amount of Reborn taxis coming in from the horizon. Every lane of the road was filled to the brim with automobiles waiting for their turn to enter the nation's gates. Lolo and the Rebornians were hard at work trying to accommodate the large influx of visitors. Thankfully, they had already prepared for this and quickly funneled all of the traffic onto a new parking spot for tourists. The amount of visitors today far exceeded the peak from before. The advertisement worked, he muttered to himself. And this was just the people from the King's region coming to visit. Those that came from the Queen's region would only come later in the day, which Michael expected the road to be even busier than it already was now. Some tourists went out and explored the nation first. They became astonished at everything: the electrical lights, the tall concrete buildings, the varied demi-human districts, and even the giant baseball stadium. However, some tourists were immediately drawn to the large structure out in the open desert just beside the nation. Whoa! It's even bigger than the painting on the poster, one of squires said, peering over the metal fences around the roller coaster. It reaches up that high. It's touching the clouds. Maybe it is a little bit scary. Michael surveyed the visitors and noticed that most of them were strong in their own right. They all had 3-star realm cultivation or higher. These are adventurers, Michael guessed. It made sense why they would take up the challenge of the roller coaster. Seeing such a large line at the roller coaster entrances, Michael lowered himself to the ground and met up with Kong and the other engineers. They were all inside the control building right next to the roller coaster itself. Here, they could monitor the ride at all times and ensure that it was working properly. Is it ready? He asked them. As ready as we'll ever be, boss, Kong replied, wiping his sweat. I can't wait. Vivi said, looking over the glass window to peer at all the visitors waiting to get inside the ride. I can taste their excitement from here. We can finally taste fear. The fairies beside Vivi cheered. Michael noticed that even Virion was here. What? Even an old gal like me feels hungry at times, she said, noticing Michael's judgmental look. Michael raised his hands, conceding. The fairies did deserve this reward after working so hard for an entire week. Well then what are we waiting for? Let's go and show these people the time of their lives. Michael pulled the lever on the machine and suddenly the entire roller coaster roared into life. The sign on the gates lit up in bright lights saying, Extreme Canine Rapids. The crowd on the entrance wowed. Just then, Rebornian attendants moved to the gates and started taking fees for the entrance. They then took 10 of the first few people who arrived and showed them towards the loading area. Coincidentally, the ones who were lucky enough to be the first customers of the roller coaster was the group of 10 squires coming from the Queen's region. Welcome to Extreme Canine Rapids. Please make sure that all your belongings are stored in lockers located to your left, said a perky dogfolk attendant to the customers. Please follow me so that I can show you to your seats. Chapter 396, Thrilling but Amazing. The roller coaster attendant assisted all 10 of the squires, putting on their seatbelt for them. This looks like a Reborn taxi but without the roof, said one of the squires. I don't need the seatbelt. I'll just hang on to this without problem, said the bespectacled teen. Once all of them were locked in place, the attendant left the loading bay and closed the entrance gates of the roller coaster. Enjoy your ride, she shouted at them. The teens were still laughing and treating this ride as just a silly little experience. There was still excitement and innocence on their faces with them having no idea about what was to come. Tsshh. The sound of the roller coaster's hydraulic system booting up startled the squires. They thought they were in the presence of a huge monster bear. Then, the coaster train started to move, slowly climbing up the slopes until it reached a height where they could even see a bird's-eye view of the entire nation of Reborn. As the squires looked down, they realized how high they were from the ground. It was at this point that they stopped laughing. It was serious. Even with their enhanced physical skills, they would find it hard to escape unscathed from a fall this high. And finally, they reached the very apex of the roller coaster, giving them a brief moment of respite. But that didn't last long as soon they saw that the rail tracks immediately led down to a near 90-degree fall. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Wait. We're gonna fall. No way. Click, click, click. Then the coaster car sped down at speeds they had never experienced before. Their hearts almost leapt up to their throats. Ah. Mommy save me. Kaya. The teenage squires let out screams that would have been mistaken for a girl's voice. They clung onto their seatbelts as if their lives depended on it. Each cart could seat 2 people at a time, so the squires ended up hugging each other out of fear, thinking that this would be the last time they saw each other alive. The worst part was that they were directly going down to the ground as if they were going to crash. But at the very last second, the tracks twisted to the side, making them all pull to the opposite direction. The coaster then went on to perform multiple loops that disoriented them all. Their screams rang out through the roller coaster and even reached out onto the streets of Reborn. The people waiting for their turn at the gates of the roller coaster couldn't help but look on with worry at the speeding carts on the tracks. What's happening to them? Are they dying? I didn't know it would go that fast. After the carts exited the looped portion of the ride, the squires couldn't help but breathe heavily from exhaustion. They couldn't even tell left from right after what they experienced. Is it over yet? As it turned out, the answer was no. The carts eventually entered an underground tunnel that was completely pitch black, leaving the squires completely anxious about what was to come. At least before, they could anticipate the twists and the loops. But now, they couldn't even tell if they were going to crash into the ground or not. All they felt was the pull of gravity as the cart sped through the course. Just then, electricity buzzed. The squires felt the hairs on their arms stand up. It sounded like there was a huge thunderstorm inside this tunnel. A large electric arc zapped above them, almost hitting them in the head. This scared them witless. The power of that electricity was akin to a 4-star magic spell. Even they wouldn't be able to deal with that if it hit them. They all screamed, thinking they were about to die before eventually the ride exited the tunnel and slowly came to a stop. The squires were still shouting to the top of their lungs at this point, thinking that the ride was still not over. It was only when their seatbelts popped out of its lock did they finally open their eyes. Have you enjoyed the ride, sirs? The attendant asked them. The attendants helped them all get out of the cart. If they didn't, the squires would have stumbled forward and lost their balance. They were led to the exit where a bunch of the people waiting in line looked at them with curious gazes. Excuse me, young man. How was it? The squires looked back at the crowd with their eyes completely sunken and their faces as pale as snow. That was scary. I thought I would die. I want to throw up. One of the adventurers on the line was confused. It's bad then. However, the squires shook their heads. Even though I felt my heart in my throat, that is still the single most exciting thing that I have ever been in my entire life. I don't know if it makes me crazy, but I want to do that again. And to prove their point, the squires all went back up the line again, ready for another go-around at the roller coaster. Michael watched on as more and more people experienced the roller coaster. Each time, he could hear their screams echoing out to the nation and leading people to come over to the side and see what was going on. "It's a hit, boss." Kong celebrated. "It sure is," Michael replied. "Look at Vivi and the fairies. They're having a field day." Above the roller coaster ride were these blobs of light that were buzzing around the carts. These were the fairies who were getting ready for their meal as each time the customers screamed, they swooped down and consumed every fear emotion they could harvest. "Tight, tight. This is the purest fear that I have ever tasted." Vivi screamed out like an addict. The fairies were so excited that the roller coaster ended up looking like it was filled with golden glitter. Each time they fluttered their wings and consumed emotion, they would release their gold dust in the air. Michael couldn't blame them. After all, as more and more people went on the roller coaster ride, the more people started to anticipate the thrill. Each person that rode in it screamed their lungs out. But still, at the end of the ride, they would pledge that it was the best experience they had ever felt. So, the mere sight of the roller coaster was creating fear from the customers, leading to more nourishment for the fairies. After seeing the success of the roller coaster, Michael had all the reborn prisoners be sent here to witness what was happening with their own eyes. The bastard bandits who had worked on this project for a week straight could now see the fruits of their labor. "This is because of your work," he said to them. The prisoners looked at the people crowding the roller coaster gates. Despite fearing the ride, there were smiles on their faces. "We did that?" asked one of the bandits. They never thought that something they made would make someone so happy. But it did. This experience was what truly made them believe in the Reborn system. Chapter 397, Helping Dad. The roller coaster became a big hit. So much so that it had gathered a bit of a reputation within the adventuring circles. "You're not really brave until you experience the roller coaster," they said. The ride had gathered a lot of extreme enthusiasts, warriors, adventurers, and just people who were seeking a new and thrilling experience. But of course, there were still people who weren't looking for a near-death experience. There were a lot of visitors and tourists who simply wanted to relax and enjoy their holiday. For them, Michael prepared a festival in the nation of Reborn. There were all sorts of food and drinks prepared in the plaza, ready for people to eat and enjoy. And thanks to Shiina and Castell's quick management, they were able to make a parade roll through the streets of Reborn with live music playing and giving a magical joyous effect on anyone listening. Everyone was celebrating, both Rebornians and tourists alike. Of course, Michael was in the mood for celebrations as well. But first, he wanted to visit his father, Bart. It had been a long time since the two of them talked face to face. He used his shadow clone to transport himself directly to the recreated Vanderbilt mansion in the parched lands. The place was completely empty, desolate of any maids and butlers, even they were having a day off and celebrating the festival. The only one around in the mansion was Bart, who was in his office balcony looking over the nation of Reborn with a bottle of beer in his hands. "Dad, I'm home." Bart quickly turned around, his face brightening up as soon as he saw his dear old son. "Michael, my boy. It's been such a long time since you visited me." The two of them hugged, exchanging smiles. "Yeah, sorry, Dad. Been a bit busy with the expansion in the Queen's region." Bart nodded, pursing his lips. "I know, son. The Queen's region can be a tricky place to navigate through. But still, you were able to triumph in the end. You've already conquered the southern tip." Michael scratched his head, a bit embarrassed after being praised. "By the way, how's your mother?" "Same old. You know Mom. She's been setting me up with a good friend of mine," he replied, chuckling. Bart chuckled as well, but soon his smile faded. "She's been overbearing lately, hasn't she?" "That's my fault, son. She hasn't been answering any of my letters lately." Truthfully, Michael had already heard about this from Castell. Since Bart was working with Castell, she had noticed that he had not been himself lately. And as it turned out, the Vanderbilts were having marital problems. The two of them had lost their spark after Bart lost his company. And because of that, the two of them were slowly drifting apart as the days passed. Eventually, Lilia moved out of their house and went on a trip to the Queen's region to be with Michael. That was the reason why she was there, and he was back in the parched lands. After that, Bart quickly tried to get her back. He was sending her letters to no avail. "Dad, do you remember what you told me about your first date with Mom?" Bart smiled, reminiscing about the good times. "Yeah. I fell in love with her at first sight. I met her in a restaurant called the Pyramid Cuisine. Sometimes I wish I could turn back time so that I could go back and we could feel the spark we had for each other back then. Funny coincidence. Did you know that a chef from that restaurant visited Angora City? I tried to get a meeting with him and see if I could reserve a table at his restaurant, but it seems that I was not influential enough to get his attention." Michael smiled. "You don't have to worry, Dad. I got you. I talked with Chef Gastilla and he'll be cooking a meal for you, just like your first date with Mom." That was the favor he asked from Chef Castillo. He wanted the chef to cook the same meal that Bart and Lilia had backed during their first date. Bart immediately brightened up as he heard that. "Really, son? You were able to persuade someone like Chef Castillo?" Michael scratched his nose. "Of course. Castillo will be working with the Reborn company from now on, so this is just a small favor that I got from him." His father was overwhelmed with emotion that he couldn't help but shed a tear. Then he quickly hugged Michael again, tightening his squeeze. "Thank you, Michael, but we have a problem." Michael looked at him. "What?" "Your mom. She won't answer any of my letters, so she won't know about the invite." And she leaves every time I try to find her. Michael nodded. Don't worry, I'll deal with her. Soon, the night fell and the entire nation of Reborn was lit up by festive lights. Strands of LED lights were strung up in each and every pole, making it seem as if the stars have truly descended into the nation. This was a very pretty sight for the people of the Queen's region. This was the first time they had ever witnessed something so otherworldly. Michael then went over to their headquarters in the nation where the Dragonborns, the Shadow Orcs, and everyone else was celebrating. My dear son, where have you been? Lilia asked, immediately smothering Michael with her chest. Michael ducked away from her and escaped. Ahem, since I've been avoiding you for the last week or so, I've decided to make it up to you. Tonight I have something special for you, Mom. Lilia's eyes turned into glistening starlight. Really? How sweet of you. What is it? I don't want to ruin the surprise. I'll have to blindfold you, Mom. Thankfully, she didn't seem suspicious about any of that. She quickly ripped off one of her sleeves and tied it around her eyes, obscuring her vision. I'll hold your hand and fly you to your surprise, he said to her. Lilia seemed all the more elated as Michael grasped her hands. Together, the two of them flew through the air, high up in the skies. It took a couple of minutes, but eventually they reached their destination. On the edge of a tall cliff, there was a fancy table with white tablecloths and red plates that had beautiful-looking food already served. There were romantic candle lights in the middle and rose petals scattered around the ground. He slowly lowered his mom down and guided her to her seat. Is this a special meal? Lilia asked, sniffing the air. Yes, Mom, but you can only open your eyes at the count to 3. 1, 2. Lilia finished counting and slowly unraveled the blindfold on her eyes. Her vision slowly adjusted, seeing the romantic dinner in front of her. Michael? She asked, looking around but seeing no one around her. It was then that she noticed the fancy plates, the candelabra, and the exotic food in front of her. This all came from the pyramid cuisine. Not only that, it was the same exact one when she met. Just then, she heard a voice behind her that interrupted her thoughts. Excuse me, miss, I couldn't help but notice your beauty. Chapter 398, Dinner Date. Lilia turned around only to see Bart in an old-timey dashing royal uniform. This immediately brought back memories for her, memories when they first laid eyes on each other. And those words. Excuse me, miss, I couldn't help but notice your beauty. Those were the first words he ever said to her. Now everything made sense for Lilia. The candlelit dinner, the uniform, the words. Bart was trying to recreate the moment when they first fell in love. Miss, do you mind if I take a seat? Bart asked, going to the opposite side of the table and looking forlornly at her. Lilia's cheeks blushed. But then she remembered that she was mad at him, so she quickly turned her head and snubbed any of his attempts at conversation. I don't know you, she replied. That's why I'm introducing myself, Bart wittingly replied. I have a feeling that we'll end up together in the future. But Lilia still wouldn't even acknowledge his presence. Bart sighed. I know that I haven't been good to you this past year, but I can change. I can rekindle that spark we had together. Come on, please? Give us a second chance. Finally, Lilia looked at him and snatched the rose from his hands. This doesn't mean that I forgive you, Lilia harumphed. Yes, it's just a dinner date, Bart relented. Despite looking like it had failed, Bart knew from the look on Lilia's face that she was starting to forgive him. Isn't this pyramid cuisine? She asked, looking at the expensive-looking full-course meal at their table. This was something that only people with high statuses could afford to eat. Yep, it's the same exact one we ate back then. We looked so out of place in the restaurant, people thought we were beggars. I do remember. You didn't tell anyone you were a Vanderbilt. And I was just recovering from an adventuring mission. We stood out like a sore thumb in front of the royals. Lilia and Bart chuckled as they reminisced about the good times they had in their youth. Meanwhile, on the other side of the cliff amidst a forest of trees, Michael and the others were spying on this romantic affair from these star-crossed lovers. Aw, that's so cute. Look, Michael. Una pointed at the table when Bart was trying to spoon-feed Lilia with a piece of steak. She seemed offended but eventually ate from his spoon. Ho ho ho, it is indeed cute. Oh, how I wish I could implant my amnesia onto them so that they could start again as new lovers, Grieve said. Guys? I kind of feel uncomfortable watching my parents have a dinner date, Michael said to them. I'm bored too. Can we go now? Zion asked, slumping down on a tree's roots. I, for one, like the atmosphere in this place. It's quiet, Jockey mentioned. The romantic atmosphere of the dinner date was all thanks to none other than Chef Castillo. As expected of a top-tier chef from a prestigious restaurant, he knew how to cook food that blended well with the gentle night atmosphere of the surroundings. Thanks for your help, Castillo. The dark-skinned chef tipped his hat. It's no problem. Since you're helping me build my own fast food chain restaurant, this is the least I can do. Chef Castillo and the other chefs with him were immediately enthralled with Reborn as soon as they saw their nation firsthand. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. Yesterday, they toured the entire territory and could not believe how advanced they were compared to even the biggest metropolis in the Queen's region. They had even asked Michael if they could establish their new restaurants here in the nation. Michael accepted their offer and wanted to place their new establishment near the roller coaster. After all, restaurants and food stalls were a staple of roller coaster parks. Many would get hungry after that thrilling ride. By the way, I prepared 2 sets of food as a backup in case something went wrong during the date. But it looks like they won't need it. Chef Gusteau looked over at the dinner table and saw that both Lilia and Bart were no longer eating. They were standing over the cliffside, with Bart behind Lilia and holding her close to him with his hands. They both looked over the horizon, seeing the starry skies in the night sky and the bright lights of the nation of Reborn on the ground. It was a beautiful sight. I still have some extra food here if you're hungry, Chef Gusteau said as he took the tall chef's hat on his head and reached down, pulling out 2 more full-course meals the same as the one that he served to Lilia and Bart. As soon as everyone saw this food, their stomachs immediately grumbled. Yum, I'm so hungry, Zion said, subconsciously raising his hand to take a bite out of the steak. Me too, Fudge said, salivating. A good ninja needs some food. But before the 2 rascals could put their grubby hands on the plates, Shiina quickly swatted their heads and twisted their ears. Stop it, both of you, she warned. I thought you guys wanted to get out of this place? Chef Gusteau made me remember that there is still some paperworks to fill out regarding their restaurants. Shiina held both of them in her hands and slowly dragged them deeper into the forest. Come on. Your punishments are still active. You'll have to pull an all-nighter to complete those papers. Zion thrashed around, carving his nails on the tree as he tried not to get dragged away. And oh, not paperwork. I would rather train. You can't do this to me. I'm the slime god ninja. Fudge protested, but Shina's deadly grip on his slimy body prevented him from escaping. Seeing the 2 of them get dragged away, Jaka couldn't help but laugh. Kukuku. That was his mistake. Amisu. Make sure he comes too, Shiina ordered. Amisa nodded seriously before taking out her spear and waving it around. With each swing of her weapon, the air around her started to gather more and more, threatening to create a huge tornado that would sweep everything off its feet. Okay. I'll go. No need to go all out. Jaka conceded. Sometimes he feared his little sister's destructive tendencies. Ho, I forgot, eh? Nope, Shiina shouted, still dragging the 2. Sir Grieve, you're coming too. You have a lesson with your teacher, correct? Grieve, in an attempt to avoid studying, suddenly lost all of the necrotic powers in his body. His bones stopped floating in the air, falling into the ground in a pile as if he was just a washed-up skeletal remains. Amisa quietly picked up each bone and followed Shiina back to the nation of Reborn. The only ones still left in the forest were Chef Gusteau, Shiina, and Michael. There was an awkward silence for a moment. Well, I gotta go too, Gusteau said, winking at Michael before scurrying off with the Dragonborns. Michael shook his head, muttering, not you too. Yuna looked over at the perfectly placed meals on the wooden table and turned to Michael. I guess it's just the 2 of us. Should we eat? Chapter 399, Memorable Day. Chapter 399, Memorable Day. Michael gulped. I guess we should, he replied to her. Normally eating with Yuna shouldn't be that big of a deal. After all, they normally ate together during lunch and sometimes even dinner at their headquarters back in Angora City. But this time, they're alone with each other. Zion wasn't here to liven up the place. Shiina wasn't here to arrange everything. Even Fudge wasn't here, who usually sat beside him and Yuna. Not only that, but the candlelit dinner and the atmospheric surroundings made this even more romantic than it should be. Michael would even mistake this for a date. This is good. Try it, Michael. Yuna didn't seem to have any problem with the awkwardness as she continued to eat the full-course meal. Michael eventually shook his head. This is just a normal dinner with friends, he said to himself. No need to overanalyze. Once he was in that mindset, he found it much easier to pick up the spoon and start eating. But just then, Yuna accidentally dropped one of her knives to the ground just in front of Michael's feet. Since he was closer to it, Michael decided to be a gentleman and pick it up for her. But what he didn't expect was that she would also pick up the knife. As he reached for the knife, his hand bumped into hers, making him feel the warmth of her touch. Once Yuna got her knife back, they both returned to their seats. Michael, are you all right? She asked him. Yeah. I'm cool, he replied. But she could plainly see that there was an obvious blush on his face. Yuna covered her mouth, giggling to herself. A slight blush also appeared on her cheeks as she stole glances at Michael. However, he didn't seem to notice this as he was too busy trying to act aloof and nonchalant at this dinner date. No, this is not a dinner date. It's just dinner. It's not even the slightest bit romantic, he thought to himself just as the rose petals from Bart and Lilia's table got swept up by the wind and slowly went over to their table. Okay, weird coincidence, but still, this is not romantic at all. It was in that moment that Michael felt a cool feeling in his hands. He looked down and saw a single speck of white powder that landed on the back of his hand. But upon closer inspection, he realized that this was not just a powder. It was snow. Both he and Yuna looked up at the same time, witnessing as numerous beautiful and unique snowflakes rained down from the night skies. Michael raised his hand, letting some of it fall onto his palms. And with his supreme talent, he knew without a doubt that this was snow. After all this time, the special clouds that he had planted in the skies had finally grown large enough to change the very climate of the desert. These special clouds that he got from the Dwarven Kingdom consumed smoke from the ground and transformed them into all kinds of mana. This meant that if it had grown large enough, these clouds could even bring rain or even snow in this desolate desert. And with their factories constantly billowing out smoke from production, it had finally grown large enough to produce snow. It was a miracle. Snow in a desert? Yuna said, smiling. Is there anything you can't do? Michael shook his head. Okay, this is pretty romantic, he admitted. And it was at that moment that they suddenly heard a branch cracking to the side. Michael quickly turned around only for him to see his worst nightmare. Oh my god! Look, Han! They're having a date too. It's a double date, Lilia said, wiping a tear in her eye. She looked up at the skies as if the goddess herself had finally intervened and made her dreams come true. Our boy has grown up, Bart said, tapping Lilia's shoulders. Michael glared at him with a look of betrayal as if saying, really? After all that I've done for you tonight? It's not what it looks like, he said to them to quickly solve the misunderstanding. My boy here is quite the responsible man, Bart said, approaching Una. He'll take care of you. Oh, how wonderful. I hear church bells ringing. I knew that this would happen, Lilia said, clapping in happiness. Mom, this is not a date. And we're still too young to even think about marriage. Una backed him up. We're not together yet, she said. Lilia and Bart paused for a moment before turning around to have a quiet conversation with each other. She said, yet, Bart whispered. Our son still has a chance. She clearly is interested too, he just doesn't have the courage, I tell you. Michael coughed. Guys, we can hear you. But they didn't seem to care. They turned around and slowly backed away from Michael and Una. Well then, we'll let you continue your friendly date, Bart said sarcastically. Bye-bye. And before he could even catch up to them, Lilia suddenly manifested two giant vines in the ground that wrapped over them both and slowly lowered them down the cliff and back to the nation of Reborn. Michael sighed. Why can't they all just act normal? Sorry about that, he apologized to Una. It's okay. They're fun. Let's go back. I don't want to give them any more ammo. Since Una couldn't fly, Michael used the tablecloth from the table and summoned his diva. He took out the switch from his pocket and attached it to the cloth, making it freeze in place. Now, the tablecloth acted like a solid piece, which made it easier to use a flight spell on. He hopped onto the floating tablecloth and held his hand out for Una to grab. Una looked at the tablecloth and couldn't help but remember the iconic animated movie with a magic carpet. That was a pretty romantic movie as well. But from the look on Michael's face, he didn't seem to notice the similarities. You coming? Michael asked. Yeah, Prince Ali, she replied with a hushed voice. Did you say something? Una chuckled. It's nothing. I just said that the scenery looks pretty. Once they were both on board, Michael flew the magic carpet on the snowy skies, returning to the nation of Reborn. Una couldn't help but take a sneak peek at Michael with his golden hair flowing from the wind. This is a very memorable first date, she thought to herself. On the very next day, the nation of Reborn was in a complete uproar as they walked out of their hotels, their inns, and their houses only to see a pile of snow in the streets. Both tourists and Rebornians alike rejoiced at this unexpected miracle. Who knew that they could play snowball fights in the middle of a desert? This seemed to symbolize what the Reborn company could do. They could bring snow to the desert. They could bring life to a desolate place. The day that Reborn made snow in a desert would be something that they would remember forever. Chapter 400, Reborn's Unbelievable Expansion. Chapter 400, Reborn's Unbelievable Expansion. Early in the morning, Michael met up with Shiina, Castell, and Jimmy at their large headquarters situated at the very center of the nation. Lord Michael, I am pleased to report to you that the reception for the roller coaster and the festival has been exceptionally stellar. According to the low shadows patrolling the streets, there has been a lot of sentiment among the Queen's region tourists about wanting their quality of life here to be the same as in Angora City. I think that our renovation there will become even smoother than it was before because of this. Shiina presented Michael with all sorts of graphs and pie charts that depicted the steep rise of the Reborn brand name on the customers. I don't know if it's intentional or not, but the appearance of snow last night was perfect. It will be a perfect headline for the newspapers, Jimmy said, writing down some words on a piece of paper and presenting it to Michael. It said Reborn makes snow. Parched lands, desert no more. This will be an even better advertisement for people to go here. The best part is that we don't even have to pay the newspapers anything. They'll gladly print this story because of how unlikely it is. If snow in a desert still didn't make people go out of their homes and visit the nation of Reborn, then there was nothing that could have made them do so. I have also been approached by a lot of businesses and rich landowners from the Queen's region, said Castell. The letters they sent me have filled up an entire room. After they have experienced the luxury that our nation could afford, they found out that they could no longer live without it. They want to have electricity, trains, and showers in their own homes when they go back. Young master, they have even offered to front the money, the resources, and the manpower so that you could hurry the construction and renovation of Angora City. Now that was a very welcome surprise. The problem he had before was that he didn't have enough materials to build all the renovations in Angora City at once. But now it seems that the problem was solved. All it took was them getting a taste of comfort and they came pouring out all of their money and resources to Michael. I estimate that we can now simultaneously build the electric lines, railway lines, and the plumbing system for Angora City and the grafted cluster. That was a very huge load off his shoulders. Michael felt like he could float right now. Boss Michael, Jimmy said, looking up at him with a smile. With all things considered, I think that we can finally upgrade our rankings in the Golden 500. Reaching the top 400 will be easy. Soon after the very pleasant meeting with Jimmy, Castell, and Shiina, Michael soon met with a dear old friend of his, Severus Augendor. As the old man entered the room, Michael noticed that somehow the 8-star wizard with a great white beard looked even younger than when they last saw each other. The old man used to look like 100 years old. Now, his skin was very supple like that of a brisk 60-year-old. What happened to you? He asked Cerberus. Oh, have you noticed? Spending my time in your nation has done me very well. I may have visited your hot springs once, twice a day to achieve this. Michael allowed Cerberus and the other mages from the magic tower to stay in the nation of Reborn to help the research about the mithril artifacts. But it seemed like the old man spent more time relaxing rather than researching. It's been such a long time. Care to play a game? He asked. I thought you'd never ask. Cerberus smiled and waved his hand as a chessboard floated from behind him and towards the table in front of Michael. And just like old times, the two of them played using their wits and their intelligence. By the way, Michael, I couldn't help but overhear how your renovation plans for Angora City and the Grafted Cluster, Cerberus said, pushing a pawn one square forward. So, do you know what you've accomplished just now? You have now expanded your business to the entire southern tip of the Queen's region. And with the addition of the entirety of the King's region, this means that you now have full control over more than a quarter of the landmass of the entire royal continent. Michael made his move, developing his bishop piece on the board. So, he asked again as if he didn't understand how impressive this was. So, don't you know that in terms of territory in the Queen's region, you are probably up there with the conglomerates? And you did all of that without conquering a single territory. That's insane. Michael wasn't really surprised by that because he was actively not trying to conquer anything. And also, have I told you how surprised I was when I saw those fairies running around the nation? Don't you know people used to consider them as just myths and legends? Now, you could see one anywhere you looked in the nation where there's strong emotions. I mean, it's absolutely bonkers that you have the fairies and the dwarves who are famous for being secluded as your allies. Are you gonna keep on collecting these exotic demi-humans? Please tell me now so that I won't get surprised again. Michael once again had no answer for that. He didn't plan on doing that, but it happened anyway. It's not his fault that those kinds of demi-humans naturally flocked to him. Cerberus took a deep breath. I need a glass of water after that. The tower master easily conjured up a glass of water in his hands and began drinking it without break. Michael chuckled to himself knowing what was gonna happen next. Oh, and I forgot to tell you, but do you know something about divas? As the power on his chest surged upwards, the empty space above Michael started to shimmer with light before a robotic, mechanical arm manifested into reality. Its internal lights disguised as veins glimmered as if it was a computer starting to boot up. Cerberus' eyes widened as he saw the diva appear above Michael. And just like old times, Cerberus couldn't help it and ended up spitting out all the water that he just drank. Pff. Just as the mist of water spread out into the air, Michael quickly threw one of his pre-made iron switches to the air and flicked it to the off position in his mind. And as soon as the switch made contact with the water, his ability surged and glowed a dim white light that encompassed the whole mist. The water droplets stopped in midair, frozen in time. Cerberus' eyes widened even more, unbelieving of what he was currently seeing. You're a magnetic? Cerberus shouted. Michael nodded. And as he expected, the tower master knew something about them. He had a feeling about it because Cerberus was a mystic master of the Guild of Arcana. They were the leaders of the whole organization, just like how the Heavenly Knights led the order. If there was someone who knew about magnetics, then it would be someone like Cerberus. Chapter 401, Mithril Relics Use. Chapter 401, Mithril Relics Use. How did you stop the water? Is that your ability? Cerberus asked. Kinda, yeah, Michael replied. His ability was far more complicated than it seemed, but since he had just awakened it, he hadn't really mastered it yet. So, for now, all he could do was summon the switch. Cerberus then looked at the robotic arm hovering above Michael. He could tell that Michael had already ascended to the second stage of body formation. I didn't think you'd be a magnetic. Did your grandfather give it to you? Michael shook his head. No. I haven't even met or talked to him before. I stumbled upon it after defeating Christian Hammerstone. Cerberus found it quite lucky for Michael to obtain such a power without the help of the Vanderbilt family. But to be honest, he wasn't that surprised. Michael's talents always gave him a fate that would transcend the normal. He always thought that the Reborn company would do good in the business. But now that he obtained a diva for himself, then it may very well be possible for Michael to go all the way. So I'm guessing that you already went to Metropolis? You should have told me. I'm friends with the healer there and they would have given you a discount, not that you needed it anyway. Michael tilted his head. Metropolis? Cerberus chuckled. Yeah, Metropolis. You know, the large city that houses the nearest apothecary in the region? Did you not even know who put the Godforge piece in your heart? I don't know anything about that. I didn't get the surgery, Michael replied. The tower master chuckled for a few moments more before he turned to look at Michael again, who still had the same serious expression from before. You're serious? Cerberus knew that the only way for someone to become a magnetic was through a risky surgery to put the Godforge piece in the heart. And that surgery had to happen each time someone ascended the stage of body formation, which meant that Michael was supposed to have had 2 surgeries at this point since he was in the second stage of body formation. Yeah. I don't need surgery because I'm a natural magnetic. This really sent Cerberus into shock. The old man just stared at Michael before shaking his head. I know I shouldn't be surprised, but still. A natural magnetic? Do you know that even magnetics are still considered a myth from the general public? And among magnetics, a natural magnetic is even more of a legend. Nobody even thinks they're real. Cerberus had known Michael long enough to know that normal common sense didn't work on the child. But it seemed that every aspect of magic, talent, power, or smarts, Michael seemed to have an edge over everybody. It was definitely unfair. That's how I got my first Godforge piece. It suddenly flew into my chest. And I guess I can also attract other Godforge pieces from magnetics. Now, this was another bombshell. If any other magnetics heard this, they would quake in their boots. Just the thought of someone ripping away their power would make anyone want to stay away from him. But of course, he knew that Michael wasn't the type of guy to heartlessly steal someone's Godforge piece unless they truly deserved it. That's why you haven't been to any apothecaries. By the way, apothecaries are the only ones that can perform magnetic surgery. They're the only ones with specialized power to make it safe enough to perform. That's why Sinclair's Elixirs is a top conglomerate in the world. This meant that they had a monopoly on the surgery. If they're the only ones who could do it, then they could charge as much as they wanted and people would still pay for it. After all, the prospect of becoming a magnetic was a very easy way to become powerful. Cerberus then walked over to the frozen mist in midair. He looked at the switch and recognized it. This is the one that controls the light in my room here, he said. I see, so your ability can apply technological concepts you created into the world. That is a very interesting ability with lots of potential. As expected of the Tower Master, he was able to easily decipher Michael's ability with ease. Michael first moved out of the way before flicking the switch back on, with the mist finally spraying just beside him. He picked up the switch and pocketed it, with his diva soon disappearing from the air. By the way, I have a question to ask. What's the deal with mithril relics and magnetics? Cerberus slapped his own forehead as if he had just remembered something. That's right. Unlike other magnetics, you have no trouble finding a suitable mithril relic for yourself, Cerberus thought. And it's not just a mithril relic with rust and broken pieces. It's a real mithril artifact. Do you know what a mithril relic does exactly? I heard that magnetics needed to focus their power and use abilities. Cerberus nodded. That's right. A magnetic needs a suitable mithril relic in order to manifest their diva and their abilities. Without it, they would find it hard to even maintain their diva for a few seconds. Unlike them, Michael could do it without problem, so he never really had a need for getting his own mithril artifact. Cerberus then looked at the switch in Michael's pockets. How many switches can you make currently? 3 max, Michael replied. That's because you don't have a mithril relic, Cerberus explained. If you had one, you'd be able to make as many switches as you wanted as long as you had the stamina to do it. Michael couldn't believe how simple it was. He thought that he had to ascend to the next stages of body formation in order to increase the amount he could make. But as it turned out, he just needed a mithril relic to do it. That must have been the reason why Blazelle could make as many flame marks as she wanted while he could only make 3 switches at once. So all I would need is to get a mithril relic? Michael reached down to his shadow on the ground and grabbed a rapier from his inventory. The rapier was colored bright orange with the blade guard in the form of flames that jutted out to the sides. This was Blazelle's rapier. So if I use this, then I can activate my ability as much as I want? I'm guessing that it's not yours? Nope. It's from Blazelle, a magnetic from FlareCorp, he replied. Then, no. You can't use it. There is a certain process that a magnetic has to do in order to transform their mithril relic into something that they could use. And that process will start to bind that weapon to the magnetic. So unless you repurpose that weapon, then it will be totally useless to you and maybe even damage your cultivation. Michael remembered something that Virion said. Does it have something to do with that spirit of old thing? Some kind of oil. Cerberus nodded. Yes, though most people call it Sue as a shorthand. Chapter 402, Go Further North. Chapter 402, Go Further North. Magnetics need to apply a combination of Sue and their blood to their mithril relics for it to be usable. There are 2 reasons why they do this. First, the blood will allow the mithril relic to be bonded to the magnetic. It will allow them to much more easily channel their abilities through this weapon. The second reason is that the Sue has a special property that allows the mithril relic to withstand the power of a diva. Without Sue, the mithril relic would start to disintegrate per use, completely wasting the weapon. Cerberus then gestured to Michael to give him the mithril relic. May I? Michael gave it to him and the Tower Master began to inspect the weapon. Do you see this oily sheen on the blade? He asked. Michael looked at the weapon and saw an unmistakable gleam on the metal itself. It was as if it was dipped in oil, yet the texture of the weapon itself was the same as any other weapon. Not only that, but there seemed to be strange colors in the oil that reflected off the light. That is Sue. From what I can tell, this weapon has been oiled up twice, meaning that Blazelle was probably in the 2nd stage of body formation, am I correct? He was spot on. Each time that a magnetic wants to advance to the next stage of their body formation cultivation, they have to undergo 2 processes. First, they have to undergo surgery in order to put the new Godforge pieces into their hearts. Second, they have to apply another coat of Sue onto their mithril relic. Michael thought for a second. So, if someone wants to get surgery, they have to seek an apothecary from the conglomerate Sinclair's Elixir. Does that mean that they also have to find someone to apply Sue onto their mithril relic? Very astute of you to guess. That is correct. Applying Sue to a mithril relic is a very laborious task and one that requires extreme skill and specialized powers. If one gets it wrong, not only will they damage the mithril relic, but they will also waste the very rare Sue. Sinclair's Elixirs monopolizes the surgery for magnetics. Meanwhile, the leading service provider for Sue application is the Hephaestus company. It's not really a monopoly like Sinclair's because there are others that can apply Sue as well, but it's generally accepted that the Hephaestus company delivers the best service. Michael, if he wanted to control his ability better, then that meant he needed to get his own mithril relic coated with Sue. Cerberus noticed that excited look on Michael's face and immediately helped him out. You're planning to expand your Golden Road further up north, right? Michael nodded. Now that they conquered the east, it was now time to go deeper in the Queen's region. Then that means you'll eventually end up in Metropolis, the city of cities. That is where you'll find a subcompany of Sinclair's elixir. If you want to learn more about magnetics and the surgery it takes to become one, then you should go visit them. If you want to learn more about the application of Sue in mithril relics, then you'll also be able to find a subcompany of the Hephaestus company there. They won't tell you their secret process to do it, but they'll surely answer any other question pertaining to weapons and magnetics. Michael noted all of that down. It was everything he needed to find out more about magnetics. But there was something missing. You didn't tell me how I'll get Sue. Cerberus pursed his lips. Well, you'll just have to pray that you're lucky. The spirit of old comes from deep in the oceans, even deeper than Atlantis. The product is controlled by none other than the Ocean King. It is extremely hard to obtain just a single drop of Sue just lying around. Once in a blue moon, a vial of spirit of old is sold at the auction house in Metropolis. That's where you're likely to find Sue. As for how expensive it is, I can only say that it's priceless. Every company is trying hard to obtain one for themselves, which drives up the price even more. The ones that can obtain it are the ones that are able to fork up the most money. If there was one thing that Michael lacked, then it certainly wasn't money. Sure, the expenses of all the projects and renovation on all their territories put a good dent on their treasury, but the profit that they would get in the future would definitely pump up more and more money in his pockets. But money wasn't the problem. It was whether he could chance upon Sue in an auction. Then I'll definitely visit Metropolis as soon as I can, he said, with ChatJK4 making a mental note of it. Why wait? You can do it now. Michael looked back at Cerberus. But don't I need to gather up my forces? Cerberus chuckled. You don't need to worry about that in Metropolis. It is a neutral zone that forbids major war amongst any company or faction. But what about FlareCorp? Cerberus sighed. FlareCorp has drawn the ire of most companies and factions in Metropolis. They don't like the way that FlareCorp has ruthlessly conquered Batroc Town. That is not the way that companies should conquer territories. I won't be surprised if they form a coalition to free Batroc Town from FlareCorp. Trust me, FlareCorp will probably be disbanded in a few months. Michael was glad to hear that not all companies acted like FlareCorp. If you're going to Metropolis, you'll probably be running into them. The legacies. They're the subcompanies of the 5 top conglomerates of the world. They're the factions that are in Metropolis besides the Order and the Guild of Arcana. With their combined strength, FlareCorp will have no choice but to run away in fear. You should meet with them. They're nice people, Cerberus said. Since the Tower Master himself had vouched for them, then Michael couldn't wait to meet them. And if you're going to be expanding your company in Metropolis, then it's more than likely that you'll join the major factions there, no doubt about it. Once they find out all of your accomplishments here, then you'll probably go up the ranks, ha ha ha. Cerberus laughed as he looked up at the sky, wanting to see the look on those legacies' faces once they met with Michael. Surely he won't be the only victim to his surprising talents. Then I'll try and visit Metropolis as soon as possible. I think it'll be good to meet those legacies too, he replied. Since they were subcompanies of major conglomerates, then it was very likely that their leader was a magnetic themselves. It would be nice to learn more about them from someone magnetic. Blazelle didn't even want to talk to him after she lost her diva. Thanks for the info, he said to Cerberus, saying his goodbye. We're not finished with the game yet. But then Michael moved his queen and forced a checkmate. While the Tower Master slumped down in his chair, Michael turned into a shadow and transported himself out. It was then that people heard the sound of frustrated shouting coming from Cerberus' room in the nation of Reborn. Chapter 403, Making a Mithril Artifact. Chapter 403, Making a Mithril Artifact. Michael transported himself directly to the dwarven district of the nation of Reborn. He wanted to visit the forge where the ancient dwarves worked tirelessly to produce enough mithril artifacts for the entire nation. He found himself in a very hot and humid smithy where large ovens installed on the walls radiated heat everywhere. The temperature was so hot that his absolute unity defense kicked in to prevent himself from being burned. It was very impressive that the dwarves working on the forge continued on as normal without even breaking a sweat. Boss, care to join us for a beer later? Good to see you, boss. Any more inventions we need to create? The dwarves greeted him and he greeted them back. Usually he would rely on normal dwarves to create any structure that he needed, like the carts for the roller coasters and the plumbing pipes for Angora City. Meanwhile, the ancient dwarves focused solely on pumping out mithril artifacts or improving on them for better effects. I need some Damascus steel, he said to the dwarves. Oh, you need us to make mithril artifacts, boss? For who? Me, he replied. The ancient dwarves were shocked for a moment before feeling pressure on their shoulders. The responsibility of creating a suitable mithril artifact for the boss was a huge task, something they weren't entirely prepared for. Don't worry, he assured them. I'll make the mithril artifact myself. They heaved a sigh of relief. Don't get it wrong though, they would be more than happy to make Michael a mithril artifact. They just weren't sure they could make one that would fit the level of prestige that Michael had amongst them and the Rebornians. One of the dwarves quickly dived towards one of their storage bins containing lots and lots of Damascus steel. They began scouring through it, trying to find the best and most pure piece they could ever find. However, after a few minutes of searching, the dwarf grunted in dissatisfaction. "Nothing here is worthy for boss," he grumbled. Michael waved off their concern. "It's fine. Any regular piece of Damascus steel would suffice," he told them. But the dwarves wouldn't accept anything less than perfect for their boss. They quickly rallied up all of their dwarves in the forge, trying to find a perfect piece for Michael. Eventually, someone just decided to get one from the very source, the Dwarven Kingdom. If there was any Damascus steel that was worthy of Michael's status, then it could only be found in the personal vault of the Dwarven King. "Hey, you don't need to bother Byru," he said. But in approximately 5 minutes, the Dwarven King himself personally delivered Michael a pristine block of Damascus steel with its wavy and rippling design looking very organized and without any flaw or error. "Anything for my best friend," Byru said, grabbing Michael's shoulder and laughing. "You didn't have to go all the way here," Michael said to him. "Nonsense. How could I ever show my face to my ancestors if I couldn't even bring such a small gift to the man who brought us our ancient ways of Mithril?" Michael would have believed him, but the man's breath was practically smelling of beer. "You just want to relax here, don't you?" Byru grabbed at Michael's clothes and tugged on it, desperate. "They just won't let me leave the castle. They keep wanting me to sign papers and bills. I just want to drink a cold one and relax." Michael laughed and consoled Byru. "I hear ya, buddy. I hear ya. Tell them that you need my help for one day, no, a week, no, a month. A week. Any more and I would worry for the state of the Dwarven Kingdom." Byru rejoiced and immediately made plans with the other dwarves about drinking in the tavern. Of course, they couldn't really deny the request of the Dwarven King. "Join us at the baseball game tonight," said Byru. But Michael had to decline. "I'll be busy for the whole night," he said, carrying the Damascus steel block he received. And so, while Byru and the dwarves went out to have a tour of the nation, Michael situated himself into the closest forge. He put down the block of Damascus steel onto the anvil and began to think. What kind of mithril artifact do I want to create? He knew that this decision was important because Cerberus told him that mithril artifacts were kind of permanent. Once Su was coated into the weapon, it would remain in that state forever. If Michael wanted to change weapons midway in his cultivation, then he would have to reapply the coat of Su onto the weapon, wasting a lot of the very rare oil. "Should I go with a weapon?" he asked himself. Immediately, his gut said no. After all, he had never even held a weapon before. It wouldn't really work with his style of fighting too. Then maybe a wand? It was true that he mostly used mystical spells to fight, but he didn't really feel any sort of connection with a wand. Other mages could perform better with a wand, but Michael didn't need them. My mithril artifact should be a tool of some kind. He came to this conclusion because he prided himself in being a creator first. That was his main thing back when he reincarnated into this world. He wanted to create the comfort he had back then. A hammer? A chisel? A wrench? All sorts of tools came to mind, but nothing felt right. In the end, he decided to consult his partner, ChatJK4. "What do you think? What is a tool that best represents me?" "According to your personality type, there's one thing that is best suited as your mithril artifact." "It is." As ChatJK4 gave him an answer, Michael smiled. That was a very creative choice by his personal AI assistant and one that he was amazed with. The problem was that this was quite a complicated set of circuitry that he had yet to create. Thankfully though, having complete control of the southern tip of the Queen's region allowed him to gather resources that were quite rare to find. And so, he quickly contacted Shiina via shadows and began telling her of all the items that he needed. He only needed the raw form of these ingredients and he could process them all by himself to make it into whatever the blueprint required. "You can expect these things to be delivered in an hour, Lord Michael," Shiina replied from the shadows. "No need to rush," he replied to her. "Then I shall make sure they're delivered within 30 minutes, she said. And true enough, within 30 minutes, a shadow appeared in front of him and transported all the raw materials such as copper, magnets, and other such items that he needed. He was very thankful that Shiina was quite the competent secretary, or else it would have taken him days to gather all of the stuff. Once everything was ready, Michael started his preparations. ChatJK4 immediately gave him the blueprint for the machine, which was altered to become a lot simpler than the normal ones he had in his previous life. A lot of the materials were also replaced with Damascus steel in order to make it into a mithril artifact. Chapter 404, Michael's Weapon. Chapter 404, Michael's Weapon. Magic circles appeared around Michael as he began to process and mold all the raw materials he received into the desired shape and size according to the blueprints. Hammers floated in the air, smashing onto metal. Copper wires levitated in the air and began to coil around a cylindrical Damascus steel chunk. There were a lot of processes that took him an hour, but finally he was done creating a brushless motor capable of turning electrical energy into mechanical energy. Then he created these propellers that connected to the motor, allowing it to rotate through the movement of the motor. These were the only complicated things he needed to create using normal technology. The rest of it was made out of Damascus steel, serving no other purpose than to create the shape of the machine. He molded the Damascus steel using his magic, creating precise curves and edges according to the blueprint given to him by ChatJK4. As the machine was taking shape, Michael began to inject the Damascus steel with his mana. Using a technique similar to how a physical fighter gathers mana, Michael was able to evenly distribute all 8 mana elements into the Damascus steel without it turning into a unity bomb. Slowly, the metallic texture of the metal began to fade, replaced by the crystal-like appearance of the mithril artifact. It was slightly opaque, with a white glow shining from the very depths of the metal. As it finished, Michael stared at his creation, amazed at his own mithril artifact. It was very unique. He was sure that if anyone ever saw this, they wouldn't understand what it was or what it did. Only he and Yuna would know. Right now, this machine was still inactive. That was because it was missing one integral piece, the battery. Of course, he could use a normal lithium battery in order to power this machine, but that would be very inconvenient. First of all, he would have to create another suitable battery for it. And second of all, he needed to recharge it constantly because of the machine's hunger for power. But there was an alternative that fit perfectly into a mithril artifact. And that was a unity bomb. Using the normal method of creating mithril artifacts, the same way a mystical mage gathers mana in the body, putting all 8 elements into a Damascus steel would result in a very volatile and unstable material that would explode upon the slightest bit of contact with anything. That was what he called a unity bomb. But, through experiments, he found out that if he created a small enough material and with the right amount of mana, it could become stable enough to be used as an eternal power source. It was what he called a unity battery. This worked because the mithril would constantly gather mana from the surroundings, keeping it powered every time. So, he pinched off a very small piece of Damascus steel from the block and molded it into the shape of a AAA battery. He injected it with all 8 elements using no complex methods, simply brute forcing it inside. And soon, the mithril artifact was filled with the immense power of unity mana. Contained within the small vessel was enough energy that could turn an entire village into a crater. He slowly inserted this unity battery onto the machine. And with a satisfying click, the machine roared to life. VZZZZZZ. The propellers whizzed, creating enough lift for the machine to take flight into the air. Michael had created a drone. This was his mithril artifact. However, what he created was a very crude and very simplified version of a drone. First of all, it didn't have any complicated circuitry like electronic speed controllers or transmitters and receivers. It didn't even have a navigation system, gyroscope, accelerometer, or anything like that. It only had its 4 propellers connected to a motor. The only thing that the drone could do was fly upwards and nothing more. Of course, if he wanted to, he could have put all the bells and whistles that a first-rate drone would have back in his previous life. But he just felt like he didn't need to. After all, he could already control the drone even without a controller. As the drone continued its flight upwards, Michael focused on the unity contained inside the mithril artifact. They were still made out of mana, which meant that he had complete and absolute control over it. His supreme skill grabbed onto the drone, allowing him to control its movements through thought alone. This was even better than if he used a controller. VZZZZ. The drone flew down and whizzed past him. It flew over a tree and dove down towards a bald spot in its crown. Then it quickly turned upside down and looped around one of its branches before zooming past towards Michael again. It was like a fish in water. He felt intuitively connected to the drone now, allowing him to control it even if he wasn't looking at it. Eventually, he willed it to a stop right in front of his palm. But still, he had no type of circuitry attached to the battery itself. Of course, there was another solution for that as well. He took out a switch from his pockets and quickly attached it to the unity battery. And once he manifested his diva and activated his ability, the switch immediately turned off. With the unity battery no longer active, the drone soon lost its power and descended into his palms. And with a single thought, the switch flipped on and the drone roared to life. He then took out another switch from his pockets and attached it to one of the grooves at the very bottom of the drone. Then he let the machine take flight. He set his sights into the distance, where eventually he saw an acorn falling from a tree. He willed the drone into action, whizzing through the air at relatively fast speeds. As it got closer, the drone quickly flipped sideways, letting its underside point directly at the falling acorn. And with one thought from Michael, a spring burst forth from the bottom of the drone, releasing the switch that had been loaded into the groove. The switch accurately hit the acorn before hitting the ground, freezing it in the air. It worked, he rejoiced. Then he controlled the drone to come towards the floating acorn and use its underbelly to pick off the switch that had been attached to its side. And once the switch was no longer attached, the acorn fell to the ground and rolled around before a squirrel pushed it in its cheeks. This was one of the best uses for a drone and why he chose it as his mithril artifact. With the drone, he could easily attach his switches anywhere he wanted to without any problem. Not only that, but he could also modify it with lots of other complicated features. But of course, that was for the future. Once he was done testing it out, he then folded the wings of the drone and turned it into a compact box, one that could fit squarely into his pockets. And just like that, he had created his mithril artifact. Now he just needed to coat it with the spirit of Old or Su to make it a suitable weapon for a magnetic. Chapter 405, Boys Plan to Escape. Chapter 405, Boys Plan to Escape. With his mithril artifact stored perfectly in his pockets, Michael left the forge and returned to the Reborn headquarters in the Parched Lands. Eventually, he was approached by Jimmy, the news correspondent of the Reborn company. Michael, I have good news and I have some not-so-bad news, sort of, Jimmy said with pursed lips. Tell me the good news first. Well, I can safely say that the Reborn company has achieved enough feats for it to go up in the rankings of the Golden 500, Jimmy said, tapping his own chest in pride. What's the bad news? He asked. The newspaper company in Enogra City is not large enough to officially upgrade your rankings. The best that they are able to upgrade a company is the 450th rank, which is where you currently rank now. See, Angora City might be a capital city, but it has already long lost its prestige throughout the years because of the absence of the Golden Road. And the powers that be declared that Angora City is not competitive enough for a company to achieve a ranking above the 450th rank. Michael nodded along. Does that mean that we have to go somewhere else to get our new ranking? Precisely. Jimmy slammed his foot. We need a place that's really competitive with lots of high-ranking companies to compare ourselves with. There's one location in mind, eh? Let me guess. Metropolis? Jimmy looked back at Michael with surprise, wondering how he guessed his next words. Yes. Metropolis has a newspaper company that is authorized to give a ranking that is 200 and below. It would be great if you could expand the Reborn company there as your next move. Michael already had plans to go to Metropolis because of what Cerberus told him. But advancing in the Golden 500 rankings wouldn't be too bad either. Don't worry, he said to Jimmy. That will be our next move. For now, I would really like it if you go to Metropolis and scout ahead for us. Do you know about a group called the Legacies? Jimmy scratched his chin and nodded. Yes. I have heard of them. They are the ones that have the biggest market shares in Metropolis. It's not a secret that these guys are inheritors of a conglomerate as well. Michael nodded. I want you to find out what you can about them. Who they are, which family they're from, that kind of stuff. His words sent a fire within Jimmy's heart. This was just the kind of task that would scratch his journalistic itch. You can count on me, Michael. I won't disappoint. Jimmy didn't wait any longer and took a train back to the Queen's region. Michael offered for him to use a shadow orc for teleportation, but the rookie journalist refused, saying that he needed to feel the ground by himself, whatever that meant. Once Michael dealt with that, he soon entered the main office building of Reborn, where he saw a completely different vision than the one he was used to. Jakku, Zion, Fudge, and even Grieve was stuck in 4 connected desks, doing their best to sift through piles and piles of paperwork with Shiina just behind them with a bow locked and loaded ready to fire. Lord Michael. Welcome back. Shiina greeted with a smile, but never letting the tension in her bow loose. Bro Mike, help? Zion muttered, lethargic. His eyes looked unfocused as if he was starting to go crazy. Ha, no more, Jakku said, with his scales paler than even Shiina. The Dragonborn looked like he had wilted. Master. This is not the ninja way. Fudge complained, looking like a puddle of violet liquid on the table. I'm sad, huh? What was I saying? Oh right, I'm sad. Grieve, on the other hand, somehow looked even more aged even though he was already a skeleton. While the boys were having the worst time of their lives, the girls, on the other hand, were just relaxing on the balcony outside, drinking tea and chuckling to themselves. Amisu, Yuna, Vivi, Virion, and his mother were all passing around hot tea and biscuits, enjoying the view of the nation of Reborn outside. And the one that was serving them was none other than his father, Bart. The dignified Vanderbilt businessman was reduced to being a butler in front of these women. Dad? What are you doing here? He asked. Bart looked back up at Michael and smiled. Meanwhile, Lilia was the one who answered for him. Your father here is proving his worth to us. To see if he could go with us or not. Michael was confused. Go where? Lilia chuckled. With you, silly. You're going to expand the nation of Reborn to Metropolis, aren't you? Well, you're going to need a lot of support. And who better to go with you than us, your parents? Oh, Bart, more tea, please. Bart obediently poured tea in her cup. Then he quickly turned to Yuna. Yuna, dear? Would you like one as well? Yuna smiled back and nodded. Yes, please. Of course. Bart replied. Anything for my future daughter-in-law. Michael soon turned lethargic as well, slumping down on the chair right next to him. There's 2 of them, he grimaced. One of the reasons why he fixed up his parents was because he wanted them to entertain each other. He thought that if they returned to their marriage, they would stay in the nation of Reborn and stop bothering him with all these awkward setups with Yuna. But as it turned out, he was completely wrong. He had just created another monster. Okay, shift's over. You all have 5 minutes of break before you start on another batch of paperwork, Shiina said to the boys, lowering her bow. With the workload no longer bearing down on their shoulders, the boys slumped down on the ground. I can't do this anymore, Jockey whimpered. Michael consoled him and wept with him as well. As the boys bonded through mutual pain, Fudge immediately sprang back into normal form and signaled for the boys to look at him. Pissed. Fudge whispered. The slime first looked back at the girls. Thankfully, Shiina had already taken a seat at the tea table with her back turned away from them. Fudge discreetly hopped on over to the back rooms of the office where boxes and shelves of paperwork were being stored. Michael and the boys looked back at the girls before slowly making their way towards the back rooms. Once they entered inside, they were met with a very dark room with the lights turned off. Then the door closed. A single light clicked right on top of them as Fudge appeared beside them and forced them to huddle up into a circle. Why are we here? Michael asked Fudge. Master, don't you want to be away from this place? Don't you want to just be free from paperwork, from responsibility, from Shiina? The Dragonborns nodded vehemently while Grieve quietly disagreed. He already forgot what she put him through. I have heard something from the Shadow Orcs, Fudge said, looking at everyone with a serious face. They said that Flare Corp is scrambling to escape something. They've started to evacuate Batroc Town as well. And it seems that one of their major officers, the 2ND in command, is running away in our direction. He's on his way to Angora City as we speak. Boys, it's time for a hunt. Chapter 406, Rendezvous. Chapter 406, Rendezvous. Really? Are you sure about this? Jaco asked, skeptical. Yes, I'm sure. Who do you think I am? You're staring at the best ninja in the world. My information gathering skills are top-notch. Fudge replied, a little bit offended. It's just hard to believe that the second in command would flee their base. Did you happen to know the reason? Michael answered that. I heard from Cerberus that Flare Corp is getting attacked by a group called the Legacies from Metropolis. They're punishing them for conquering Batroc Town so ruthlessly. Good for them, Zion said. It looks like these Legacies are reasonable people. Then we should just stay back and let them deal with Flare Corp. That way we don't have to do anything, Jaco argued. And let them have all the glory to themselves? Fudge shouted. This is a large fish that happened to get caught up in our trap. We shouldn't waste this chance and attack. Ho ho ho, I agree with Senior Slime, Grieve commented. The best enemies to hunt are those that are on the run. I have done that many times and won, I think. Zion grabbed Jaco's collar and begged him. Please bro. Would you rather stay in this place and fill up paperwork for hours at a time? Jaco felt a tingle on his spine the moment he remembered those grueling hours. You're right. War is better than paperwork, he said. And this is also a chance for Master to become stronger. Fudge turned to Michael. Master, you want more Godforge pieces, right? Michael smiled. Hell you I do. Then it's decided. We'll attack the running Flare Corp army and hunt down their 2ND in command. The boys calmly raised their hands together and cheered with hushed voices. Meanwhile, the girls were completely unaware of what the boys were planning as they kept on sipping tea and eating biscuits. Deep in the night, Michael and the boys sneaked out of their rooms to rendezvous in a secure location away from any prying eyes. As Michael finished his transportation skill, he opened his eyes to see that he was at one of the arcade rooms in the nation of Reborn. This place had board games, mini baseball, and other such fun activities to play with the group. Even at night, the place was still jam-packed with tourists and locals alike, as this was one of the premier spots to relax and unwind. It was very crowded with no private rooms for them to talk alone. Michael sat in one of the tables available, and soon enough, the rest of the boys arrived. Why did we gather here? We're out in public. What if the girls see us? Zion said, looking over his shoulder like a paranoid man. Fudge shook his head. TSK. This is the most private place we could have picked. There's no way that Shiina would go to something like this, therefore she wouldn't ever know that we were here. Zion and Jaco both had a moment of realization. That's genius. Michael then put the focus back on the topic. So? What are the details about the Flare Corp army? Fudge smiled. It's very good, Master. According to our Shadow Orcs, their army is only made up of 500 5-star soldiers. Now for others, that would be a terrifying number, especially since they would be fighting them with no army of their own, just the 5 of them. But of course, their combined powers were more than enough to take care of those soldiers. Grieve alone could defeat more than half of them without problem. The problem now laid with their leader, the 2ND, in command of the entire Flare Corp company. His name is Arseny, and he's the one that controls the entire army of Flare Corp. According to what our spies have gathered, it seems that he was personally sent to the lower part of the Queen's region to assess their escape route. It seems that they don't even know what happened to Blazel yet. So, Arseny is on his way to the East Forest to try and meet up with her. It truly seemed that Flare Corp was getting pressured from all sides. They wouldn't send in their second-in-command for a simple scouting mission if they weren't truly desperate. It was obvious that Flare Corp was afraid of the coalition of all the Legacies in Metropolis, or else they wouldn't have rushed their moves so soon. We can intercept them in the forest, giving us the advantage, Fudge said. We just need to wait one more day before we can hunt them down. Oh, I can't wait to wreak havoc on their forces, Zion said, punching the air. Fudge then went on to give them a very detailed account as to what they were going to expect when they attacked Arseny. It seemed that Fudge himself had surveyed the whole situation, allowing the information to be as accurate as anyone could have found out. Soon after their meeting, they all dispersed to make their preparations for the battle that was to come. They sharpened their mithril artifacts, replenished chocolate supplies, and just warmed up in general. Meanwhile, Michael prepared for the fight by summoning his drone and his diva to practice his abilities. The drone flew with precision according to his thoughts, sweeping in the air, launching switches, and retracting them. Once he was sure that it was all in good condition, he did his final preparations by creating another switch for him to use. Since one of the switches he had was used for the drone's battery, he now only had 2 in his arsenal. So he focused his mind and began to beckon for the ground to give him another piece of raw iron ore. And in just a few moments, a chunk of iron ore burst out of the soil and landed in front of Michael's hands. It didn't take long before his diva began to do its magic onto the raw iron ore, melting it and molding it into a fine, precision artwork that only electricians could appreciate. Now he had 3 switches ready to be used. But just as he was about to retract his diva from reality, he suddenly realized that he wasn't feeling the least bit tired from the creation of the switch. Usually, after creating the third switch, he would be unable to focus his mind into using his ability, limiting the amount of switches he could use. But now he didn't feel that exhaustion at all. He felt as rejuvenated as he was before. Could it be? Following this hunch, Michael closed his eyes and focused on his mind once again. A few seconds later, another chunk of raw iron ore burst forth from the ground and floated right in front of him. He then offered this iron ore up to his diva for it to mold. And suddenly, the robotic hand glimmered with futuristic pulsating lights as it used its mini mechanical limbs to form the iron ore into another switch. He now had 4 switches. He then put all of them in the ground and willed them all to turn on. And it did. All 4 of them clicked as it switched on. This meant he could command all 4 of these switches simultaneously. Is that the limit? He asked himself. Chapter 407, Switches Galore. Chapter 407, Switches Galore. Michael knew in his heart of hearts that this wasn't the end of it. He felt like he could make more switches if he wanted to. Spurred on by this feeling, Michael closed his eyes and began to concentrate even more, willing the iron found on the ground to form into a chunk and float towards his hand. The futuristic robotic arm above him reached down, taking the iron ore in its hand before beginning to mold it into the switch. And before the diva was even finished with its construction, Michael focused once again and willed another iron ore to come close to him. As the diva finished the switch, it immediately went back and reached for the new iron ore, creating a new one without even a single break. Michael was astonished. The fact that he didn't feel any fatigue or exhaustion meant that he could create as many switches as he wanted without limit. This was a complete change from when he could only command 3 switches at a time. He immediately looked at the floating drone in front of him. It's because of this, he thought. His mithril artifact allowed him to break the limits of his ability. But how is this possible? I thought only mithril relics who had been coated with Su can enhance an ability. According to Cerberus, coating a mithril relic with the spirit of old meant that they could funnel the diva's power and allow a magnetic to use it much better than before. But somehow he could do that without Su. After giving it some thought, he realized that the reason must have been because he wielded a mithril artifact, not a relic. His weapon was still in tip-top condition, while mithril relics had been corroded over time, meaning that it had probably lost most of its power because of it. This was an advantage he didn't think he would have. But now he was glad that he didn't have to get his own Su in order to get its benefits. I have also noted that your drone has not experienced any deterioration at all. This means that you do not have to use Su to protect it from your diva's power. ChatJK4 added. Does that mean I don't have to use Su? Michael wouldn't complain. After all, the spirit of old was something extremely rare to get. He was glad that he didn't have to go through all of that trouble to improve his mithril artifact. Now armed with this power, Michael began to stock up as many switches as he could possibly make. So much so that he probably wouldn't run out even if he used 1,000 of them at the same time. He also tested them out, starting with controlling 10 switches at the same time. Seeing that he could do it, he immediately went up to 50, then 100, and then to 1,000. Theoretically, he felt like he could control all of them. However, it was practically hard to do so. It was like concentrating on reading while 1,000 television were simultaneously blasting music. It wasn't impossible, but it was extremely hard to control all of them. But he wasn't disheartened by this. In a true fight, he probably wouldn't use more than 100 of them at the same time. He already tested this out and found out that it worked smoothly without any problems. He spent the rest of the day continuing to experiment with the switches and trained using his drone to place and detach them anywhere he wanted. On the very next day, Shiana woke up early in the day to supervise the boys on another session of paperwork. But as she entered their rooms, all she saw were empty beds and a small note that said, "Sorry. Feeling sick today. I'll work tomorrow." Now, the fact that they got sick at all was the very first red flag. Ever since they became Dragonborns, they never got sick, not even once. But even then, the fact that every single one of them had the same excuse meant that something fishy was going on. She also went over to Michael's room and saw Lilia already by the door. "Lord Michael is gone too?" she asked Lilia. "Yup. Those boys are up to something," Lilia said, squinting her eyes. But of course, by the time they found this out, Michael and the boys were already out of the parched lands and entered back into the Queen's region. They hid on the very edge of the eastern forest, hiding by the bushes and waiting for their target to come running towards them. "Are you sure they'll come here?" Jaka asked Fudge. "Stop worrying. They'll be here." "I'm starting to worry. At this point, what if Sis Shiana comes in and ruins everything?" Zion said, biting his nails. "I would rather just meet the army head on than just wait here. I feel like my mom is already breathing down my neck," Michael said, shivering. Michael and the boys were more worried about the girls rather than fighting an actual army. Meeting one meant death, and meeting the other meant that they would have to find 500 new spots in Reborn prison. It made sense why. Eventually, Michael saw something in the distance. With his supreme skill, he was able to see past the rolling hills in front of them and saw organized rows and columns of light mana trekking the land. These were none other than the Flare Corp army that they were expecting. "Here they are," he said to the group. "Are you all ready?" Jaka held his sword's hilt and muttered a countdown. 3, 2, 1. Zion shouted, springing out of the bushes and rushing towards the army alone. Hey, I didn't say go yet, Jaku complained. Fudge turned into a shadow and zoomed past the rolling hills and towards the Flare Corp army. Even Michael had already gone off flying in the air, getting ready to intercept the army. Ho ho ho, we better get going, Sir Jaku. Or else we'll lose out on all the fun. Jaku shook his head before a smile crept on his face. As he pulled out the sword from his sheath, his body turned into blue lightning that raced through the lands, eventually passing Zion, who quickly tried to catch up. Ho ho ho. Youth. Grieve cheered, seeing all the young UNS be so active. Me though, I shall take my time. He then slowly walked towards the rolling hills, using his sword as a cane just like an old man. Meanwhile, the 500-men Flare Corp army eventually noticed the change in the air. Even if they weren't paying attention, Michael and the boys weren't exactly hiding their presence. They could see lighting zooming in the air, a shadow looming over them, a golden-haired boy floating in the air, and a lizard-like boy punching the air and creating shockwaves. At the very end of this army was a man whose hair was short and was colored a fiery red. It rose up in the air, creating the illusion that he had fire on the top of his head. This was none other than Arseny, the 2ND in command of the entire Flare Corp company. Some would say he was the entire brains of the operation. But right now he had no idea what he was seeing. Chapter 408, Facing Against the Flare Corp Army. Chapter 408, Facing Against the Flare Corp Army. Now that he was closer, Michael finally had a good look at the supposed 2ND in command of the Flare Corp company. Arseny wore bright orange armor with symbolisms of tyrannical fire embedded into its very design. He looked regal compared to the other soldiers who wore the signature Flare Corp chest plate. Not only that, but he was riding a horse who had the flag of Flare Corp attached to its side. Michael, as he floated in the air, made eye contact with Sunny. You came from the East Forest, Arseny observed. Blazel is supposed to welcome our troops. Are you part of the bastard bandits? As expected, the 2ND in command was a lot more perceptive than Michael thought. No, I'm not, Michael replied. The bastard bandits have disbanded. Arseny showed a face of shock before his eyes focused as he tried to process the information. Then, I'm guessing that you are not here to welcome the great army of Flare Corp? No, I'm not, Michael once again replied. By now, Zion, Jaku, Fudge, and Grieve had all taken their respective spots in front of the Flare Corp army. It was them versus 500 soldiers in the 5-star realm with only a few hundred meters in between them. Then surrender to the glory of Flare Corp. This territory shall soon become the new headquarters of our nation. Michael smiled. And what will happen if we don't surrender? Arseny stared up at Michael with fire burning in his eyes. Then I shall send in my forces to decimate your small group. There shall be nothing that stands in the way of our Flare Corp company. The 500-men army slammed the bottom of their spears in the ground, creating a shockwave that slightly shook the earth. But it seems that this wasn't enough to intimidate Michael and his small group. What do you think, guys? He asked them. Should we surrender? Zion cracked his neck and his fist. I didn't wait all that time just to come home empty-handed. Ho ho ho, I may not have any memory, but I sure know that I have never backed out from a fight, Grieve said, his ribs clacking as he laughed. You heard them, Michael said to Arseny, shrugging. The commander looked absolutely pissed from hearing Michael's nonchalance at the whole situation. This belittled the prestige and power of a Flare Corp army. I suggest that you think it over again, Arseny said. You don't know who you're dealing with here. Michael smiled. We'll take our chances. Then you have just sealed your fate. Soldiers! Teach these guys a lesson. Arseny shouted, with his voice creating a literal fire within the army formation. Flames erupted high up into the skies, enveloping the 500 soldiers inside. They each began to emit magic circles on their body, consuming the fire around them to boost and enhance their physical capabilities. Arseny scanned Michael's accomplices before his eyes landed onto the red-scaled demi-human lizard. Arani had no idea what kind of species he was, but he was sure that the kid only had a 3-star realm cultivation at best. He scanned the other people too. The blue-scaled lizard was also only in the 3-star realm, and the hooded figure behind them was so weak that they didn't even give off any power signatures. He raised his hand, and from his palm burst forth a fireball that shot towards the sky and exploded in the air, creating a strange pattern. The soldiers looked up at this pattern and immediately knew what they were supposed to do. Charge, the soldiers shouted. With perfect synchronization, the soldiers marched out into these perfect formations of 50 men, forming a platoon. Each platoon focused on a single target, aiming to bring them down with barely half of their entire forces. The first platoon charged at Zion, their spears creating a phalanx formation. As they charged, their powers created a 5-star spell that formed a shimmering figure of a rhino's horn. Zion smiled as he welcomed his new target. He skipped around like a boxer waiting on his corner. And just as the platoon of soldiers were only 100 meters away, he pulled out his mithril artifact gauntlets and wielded it in his hands. The mithril artifact improved the flow of the mana from his body, boosting his initial strength of a 3-star all the way to a 4-star power. But that wasn't enough. He took out a chocolate pellet from his pockets and swallowed it whole. The Rebornian skill, Sugar Rush, gave him a boost of magic, allowing him to break through his limits and reach the 5-star level and almost above it. Arseny immediately stood straight as he realized what had happened. But before he could even process this information, Zion suddenly jumped up from his stationary position and reached the air just above the platoon. Zion's gauntlets glowed a violet light before he punched the air, creating a crack in the fabric of space. The crack propagated downwards before reaching the platoon's formation. Their combined 5-star spell resisted the power of the space-shattering punch. But before they could even rally their strengths together, the rhino's horns started to shake and wobble before eventually exploding into bits of ember. As Zion's punch propagated to the ground, the soldiers exploded out into the air, breaking their formation entirely. "How is this possible?" Arseny complained. But before he could even take a moment to think, he felt another disturbance in the air. Jocko had turned into literal blue lightning as the platoon of soldiers rushed towards him. Their combined 5-star spell allowed them to create an enclosure of fire, trapping their target within. The soldiers swung their spears with power and speed, creating gusts of flame with each of their attacks. But even so, they were unable to catch even a single whiff of the blue-scaled lizard. Each time they would get close, he would turn into lightning and buzz around, electrifying everyone he touched. It only took less than 30 seconds from the formation of their enclosure before their numbers dwindled low enough for their spell to break in concentration. Eventually, Jocko stood amongst a sea of soldiers on the ground, each one burned and electrified. Who are these people? Arseny asked himself. They were far too powerful to be unknown fighters. But the worst part was that they weren't even the only ones decimating his forces. Without him even realizing it, one of the platoons had already been engulfed by a strange shadowy figure. They stood barely conscious in a dome of shadows. They stared at the air as if they didn't have a single thought in their minds. Arseny couldn't even see who was doing this. And before he could scan the area for the shadowy perpetrator, he suddenly felt something that made his skin crawl. He looked to the side and saw that his platoon of soldiers were slowly backing away. They were running from the decay that spread through the ground, wilting everything that it touched. The soldiers tried to fight this decay through their flame spells, but even their flames decayed from contact with the ground. Arseny looked towards the source of this decay and saw a skeleton figure standing still with a thin sword in its hands. As Arseny felt the power coming from the skeleton monster, he realized why his arm hairs were standing up. This monster was in the 9-star realm. Chapter 409, Red Flames. Chapter 409, Red Flames. Grieve raised up his thin sword and waved it in the air. His movement was slow, almost too slow for it to do any real damage. Yet, a few moments after he finished his swing, the entire platoon suddenly felt themselves struck with the blade directly in their chests, with necrotic energy suddenly disintegrating their proud Flarecorp chest plates into rust. An undead monster. How are they controlling it? The more and more Arseny fought with this strange group, the more he realized that their confidence was not just empty bravado. They were the real thing. The rest of his army charged forward after seeing each platoon get decimated by these single individuals. Even without Arseny's instructions, they knew that they had to put all of their efforts together if they had any chance of defeating them. However, their large numbers meant nothing to these people. Zion's punches broke through space, creating a shockwave of disturbance that destroyed all of their formations. Jocko's lightning-fast sword was untouchable, defeating tens of soldiers just before the thunder cracked in his wake. Fudge kept himself hidden in the shadows, abducting any soldier he touched into an insurmountable illusion that kept them standing in place, completely vulnerable to any attacks. And the most dangerous of them all was Grieve, whose 9-star power completely destroyed any coordinated magic spell that these soldiers could think of. His swings looked normal, yet it would decimate almost 10% of the soldiers each time, decaying their armor and weapons into rust particles that flew into the wind. Arseny knew at this moment that his army was about to lose. This unknown group of individuals had somehow bested Flarecorp's best of the best. "You guys have no idea who you have angered. This world has powers that you do not even comprehend," he said, summoning all the strength he could muster. He raised his halberd in the air, its blade suddenly glowing an orange light as he started to unleash the power hidden in his chest. A flame emerged on his entire body before a shimmering figure appeared above his head. The roaring head of a lion appeared above Arseny, with its mane filled with that of blazing flames that only seemed to grow hotter as the lion slowly awakened. This was Arseny's diva. A flaming lion. However, this diva's body was still clearly incomplete. The only thing that was manifested was its head, with the rest of the body still yet to appear. But that was enough to bring back the dwindling morale of the Flarecorp soldiers. They suddenly gained a new sense of confidence as they saw the appearance of this flaming lion. They knew that their commander would finally unleash one of his greatest strengths that surely none of these people had ever even seen before. The fire on this diva lit up their spirits once again, giving them a second wind to rally up their power and defend against these powerful individuals. With the formation of his diva, Arseny burst into action. He jumped up from his horse and charged towards Zion and the rest of them. Seeing this, Zion's smile seemed to only grow wider. He took this as a challenge. With his gauntlets glowing with a violet power, he stepped back before unleashing one of his strongest attacks. He punched the air multiple times, creating more and more shattered fabric of space that eventually traveled down towards the speeding Arseny. Zion's barrage of punches traveled through multiple soldiers, each one launching far away the moment the shattered space propagated towards them. However, as it reached Arseny, he raised up his halberd with both his hands and reared it up behind him. And just as Zion's space-breaking barrage of punches reached him, he swung his halberd wide, meeting the punch head-on. The two powers clashed, creating a shockwave that sent the weaker soldiers flying. Even the ground began to crumble, creating a crater at the point of impact. Zion's attack was an unrelenting force, continuing to add more power even after the collision. And for a moment it even seemed as if Zion was going to win this battle. But it was at that moment that Arseni's diva shouted a silent roar, with its flaming mane bursting forth with life. Suddenly, Arseni's halberd erupted in a pure red flame, a power that did not contain a single ounce of mana, yet its power was enough to fight against Zion's power. The red fire spread towards the shattered space of Zion's punches, engulfing it in a red flame. "Submit," Arseny commanded. And suddenly, the shattered space engulfed in red flames suddenly lost all of its power. Zion felt its connection with the spell break, as if he no longer had control of it at all. "Return for me," Arseny added. And suddenly, the shattered punches began to turn back, creating a shattered space that reached towards Zion at speeds far faster than his original spell. Zion felt his own shattering punch come towards him at full speed. This was the first time that the young Dragonborn felt his own spell backfire on him. With his physical speed, Zion could have dodged away at the very last second. But his stubbornness got the better of him, and he ended up powering his gauntlets a second time to try and beat his own power. He punched the air, his arms almost blurring as he released a flurry of blows even faster than when he used it the first time. A new shattered space appeared in front of Zion. As soon as his final punch landed, the cracks propagated forward, coming face to face with flaming red shattered space. The two collided, creating sparks of lightning as the two cracks crashed into one another. Wind picked up from the impact, turning the green field into a bald crater, turning deeper and deeper as the two forces fought against each other. "Empower!" Arseny shouted, and soon, the red flames enveloping the cracks suddenly grew even bigger and hotter. The cracks seemed to have gained a new strength as it started to overpower Zion's attack. Seeing this, Zion didn't hesitate to jump forward and create more space-breaking punches to defeat Arseny's counterattack. But it was at that moment that the red flames grew larger, soon enveloping Zion's attacks. Zion felt his own power get cut off once again. The two cracks, once fighting, had ceased all conflicts and merged together to become a giant crack in space. Soon, this giant zombified amalgamation of Zion's punches combined and then started to shoot towards its sender. "There is nothing that my flames cannot conquer," Arseny said. "You were a formidable fighter. But you too shall perish in the face of Flarecorp's greatness." The giant flaming red cracks would soon envelop Zion, and there was nothing that would stop it. Arseny knew it was over. He turned around, scanning the battlefield for his next target. But it was in that moment that silence reigned. A couple of seconds had passed, yet the crash that was supposed to have resulted in a large explosion never happened. He turned around only to see the red flaming cracks frozen in the air just a few meters away from Zion. "Phew," the young Dragonborn said. "Thanks for the save, bro, Mike." Chapter 410, Flaming Lion. Chapter 410, Flaming Lion. Arseny felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. The flaming lion above him was growling as if it was wary of something. He slowly panned up his head to the skies, only to see the golden-haired boy standing in the air. This child had stayed away from the battlefield this whole time. Arseny thought that he was just a spectator, nothing more than a kid who tagged along without knowing anything. Yet as he looked up at the skies, he saw something that he could not believe. Above the boy's head, there was an image of a right hand made out of metal whose veins seemed to be glowing with a strange white light. The fact that his own flaming lion diva had noticed this right hand meant only one thing: it was a diva. "How's this possible?" Arseny muttered under his breath, his eyes trying to adjust. He tried to scrutinize the figure, wanting to see if it was just an ordinary illusion. However, the more he observed it, the more he realized that it was the real deal. Somehow, an unknown child had gotten his hands on one of the strongest metals in the world and obtained an ability all on his own. This was akin to a monkey suddenly learning how to speak and write. This shouldn't have happened, especially in a backwoods part of the Queen's region. "Who are you really?" Arseny asked. There was no way that a boy would be able to obtain a diva accidentally. It had to have involved a healer who surgically placed the Godforge piece in his heart. "Me? I'm the leader of the Reborn company," Michael replied. The fact that Arseny had no idea of this name made even less sense. If it was low enough in the Golden 500 ranking, then there was no way it was powerful enough to obtain even a single Godforge piece. "How did you obtain that diva?" "I just found it," Michael replied. "Oh, and Blazelle gave her piece to me. Or more accurately, I took it from her." The moment Blazelle's name was mentioned, a sense of realization came to pass in Arseny's mind. She would never betray Flarecorp. "This means that you defeated her. I think I understand it now. Your Reborn company has somehow defeated Blazelle and the army we sent her, foiling our plans to conquer this entire region," Arseny said. "And looking at your members," he said, looking at the Rebornians. "It's not hard to see how they lost." "Ding. Ding. Ding. You got it right, bleh," Zion said, sticking out his tongue. "They tried to attack us." "Well, you know what happened," Jaka said, sheathing his sword. Arseny ignored them and focused on Michael. "But it still doesn't make sense. How did you defeat her and obtain a diva for yourself?" Michael shrugged. "The Godforge pieces just came to me," he said truthfully. But Arseny just scoffed, thinking that it was a bold-faced lie. "It does not matter. I will force you to tell me the truth once I have proved my diva superior to yours. Try, Michael challenged. Humph. Such confidence for someone only in the second stage of body formation. Meanwhile, I am already on the third stage and have matured enough to advance to the next one. Once I have defeated you, I will take back Blazel's God-forged pieces and surgically implement them to myself. Arseny squatted deep in the ground, holding the halberd in both hands and sweeping it in an arc around him. The red fire of the mithril relic weapon spread to the ground in a circle, creating a crescent platform that Arseny could stand on. Arise, he commanded. And soon, the chunk of soil on the ground lifted in the air and began to hover, allowing Arseny to float closer towards Michael. So anything that touches your weapon has to follow your words, Michael observed. That is correct, Arseny nodded. In his mind, the results of the fight wouldn't matter even if Michael figured out his power. A lion is the king of the jungle. My flaming lion is the king of everything in the world. Anything my fire touches will submit to my words. Interesting, Michael said, nodding in satisfaction. I do not know how you prevented my flames from hitting your red-scaled friend from below, but it doesn't matter. It was a fluke. Arseny raised his hand, beckoning the platform underneath his feet to charge towards Michael. And with his halberd in hand, he swung it in a straight vertical line towards Michael. Even your clothes will strangle you, Arseny said, intending to use his red flames on Michael. Michael's feet blasted off air, allowing him to dodge easily from Arseny's swing. Humph. You're fast, but... Before he could even finish his sentence, he suddenly saw a bright light flash on the corner of his eye. He saw the tip of Michael's finger glow white with power. Worry showed on Arseny's face. But he soon realized that this power was not an ability but just a simple spell made out of mana. This would not affect his diva. How did you defeat Blazel if you don't even know the basics of magnetics? It was at that moment that Michael fired his Unity gun, creating an instantaneous white laser beam that hit Arseny square in the chest. Arseny's eyes widened, not expecting it to be so fast he couldn't even react. But thanks to his top-of-the-line Flare Corp armor, the laser beam slowed down just a few milliseconds, enough for his red flames to manifest and try to conquer the laser beam. However, Arseny's red flames seemed to recoil in pain as it touched the Unity gun beam, with its flames becoming destroyed upon contact. Arseny could only stare in shock as the Unity gun continued on its course and penetrated through his armor and into his body. KGH. Arseny winced. Blood started to flow from the wound in his chest, despite it being smaller than a fingernail. Red flames manifested around the wound. Stop bleeding, Arseny said to himself, causing the blood to flow back into his body. Still, he could not reverse the injury. Holding his chest in pain, Arseny looked at Michael, confusion and anger directed at him. A mana spell that could defeat an ability? That's impossible. Michael didn't respond and simply raised his hand again, with the tip of his fingers glowing with the same power as before. Now wary of the strange spell, Arseny dived back into the ground. He swooped down into the forest, slicing trees as his halberd swung by. Each of the trees were cut from the trunk. The sound of wood splintering echoed out as the trees started to fall like dominoes. But then red flames started to envelop the trees, allowing Arseny to take full control over them. Attack him, he shouted, pointing at Michael. There was a sense of urgency in his voice, one that was spurred on by the ominous glowing light on Michael's finger. 20 trees shot towards Michael, each one with its crown pointed at him. Just as one tree was about to hit Michael, a small blur sped forth from his fingers and attached itself to the tree. And suddenly, the tree froze in place, unable to move any further. Arseny's face turned into one of complete shock and horror as he realized that even his red flames stopped moving, as if time itself had ceased to flow. Chapter 411, Involuntarily Freeze. Chapter 411, Involuntarily Freeze. Arseny's face contorted as he focused on the red flames covering the tree. But no matter what he tried to do, he was unable to move or control his own ability, as if it had been cut off from his control completely. No. You're not supposed to overpower my ability, Arseny complained. He was in the third stage of body formation, just a half step into the next stage. He just needed to surgically implant a new God-forged piece into his body before he could transcend to the fourth stage. Meanwhile, the golden-haired boy was clearly only in the second stage. His ability was not supposed to affect an ability that was already in the third stage. That was impossible. Yet, Michael's switch stopped it all the same. Indignant, Arseny commanded the rest of the trees to pierce through Michael, hoping that one of them would be able to defeat the anomalous boy. Michael took out his hands from his pockets, revealing a switch sandwiched on each of his fingers, totaling a number of 8 switches. And as he swung his hand, each switch stuck onto a tree, completely stopping them just the same as the first one. And when Arseny tried to collide a tree into one of the frozen trees, the speeding tree ended up colliding with the tree and becoming afflicted with the time freeze as well. All around Michael were trees standing completely still. And with Arseny becoming completely flustered by what he was witnessing, Michael finally found a gap and released the power harnessed on the tip of his finger. The Unity gun shot off, hitting Arseny directly in his left shoulders, sending him reeling backwards. Ugh! Arseny screamed in pain. And before he could even recover, he saw Michael's hands start to glow again as it gathered power in his fingers. Arseny had no chance but to fly away, hoping that he could somehow dodge against that near-instantaneous laser that he had no way of defending against. Meanwhile, down below, the Flare Corps soldiers watched on with horror as their commander was left fleeing the battlefield in the face of this golden-haired boy. No, they muttered, their breaking voices indicative of their lowered morale. They thought that they would finally win against these people with Arsene Diva. But who would have thought that even this boy would have the power of the metal as well? And in the face of defeat, the soldiers decided that they were going to sacrifice their lives in order to give their commander a chance to escape or make a counterattack. Soldiers! Charge! Under the united banner of Flare Corps, the soldiers quickly turned their focus towards Michael. They gathered their power, magic circles appearing on their feet as they tried to summon a great big spell that could hopefully throw the boy off his course. But just as they were about to unleash a great fireball in Michael's direction, a flash of blue lightning crashed into their formation, electrifying most of them and breaking their concentration. Jockey reappeared on the other side of the army, his eyes still flickering with lightning. Not under my watch, he said. Damn it. If I can't defeat that Arsene guy, I'll just take out my anger on all of you. Zion shouted, rushing towards the army. The soldiers who weren't electrocuted by Jockey rushed towards Zion, thrusting their spears at him. But then Zion put his hands up, protecting his chin, and started to weave left and right into a lying figure 8 pattern. This was none other than the Dempsey roll. The soldier thrusted his flaming spear towards Zion, but his attack simply phased past the Dragonborn. And before he could retract his spear, he suddenly felt a great power punch him in his chin as Zion delivered an uppercut. Zion jabbed, punched, and uppercut anyone that tried to attack him, destroying their formation even further. Ho ho ho! I don't even have to do anything, Grieve said, leisurely lying down on the ground and watching everything unfold. Arsene saw his entire army get completely decimated as he ran away. TSK! Damn it, they're done, he shouted his anger. There was no one left remaining to help him. He knew that this was his final stand, so he quickly turned back and faced Michael. There were still about 10 trees left in his control, while the rest of them were frozen in the air. Those blocks of metal, he said, observing the switches attached to the trees. That's the source of your ability. Figuring this out, Arsene turned his halberd sideways and swung it in the trees' direction, causing a great wind to hit the flaming trees. Suddenly, the red fire enveloping them grew even hotter. Explode! Arsene commanded. And soon, the trees burst out into a million little splinters, with each one of them turning into toothpicks with a sharp point rivaling that of a pin. If your weird freezing of time is controlled by those blocks of iron, then your weakness is an area of effect spell. Arsene laughed, thinking that he had a way to win the fight. Michael, faced with millions of these splinters, looked at Arsene and fired off another one of his Unity gun. The laser beam made out of all 8 elements hit Arsene square in his stomach, making the man kneel on the platform beneath his feet. Blood started to drop from his mouth. Clearly, the injuries from the Unity gun was starting to catch up to him. But despite the injury, Arsene looked up at Michael and found a way to smile through the pain. Ha ha, my ability cannot be broken, he declared. Pierce him. His face contorted as he commanded millions of these splinters to skewer Michael from all sides. Up, down, left, right. Everything was covered. But because there were too many splinters to take control, some of them ended up malfunctioning and shooting off in the complete opposite direction. Still, there were still enough splinters to cover every inch of Michael's body. A bloody smile formed on Arsene's face, thinking that he won. But just then, he heard a buzzing sound behind him. Whizzes! Arsene turned around only to see a strange metal object hovering in the air. Even though it had no eyes, it seemed to be looking at him directly in the eyes. And before he could react, a switch block launched from the side and hit Arsene directly in the chest. As soon as the switch block attached itself to Arsene, a strange force seemed to take hold of his entire body, causing it to freeze in time. And it was in this moment that the connection Arsene had with the millions of splinters immediately cut off. The red flames surrounding the splinters became extinguished in an instant, causing them to all fall to the earth with no more ability powering their flight. Just a second later, Arsene's body began to twitch. Soon, the flaming lion above his body thrashed in the air, completely breaking free from the freezing effect of the switch. The iron block soon fell from Arsene's chest, rendering it useless. Arsene quickly looked around, not knowing what had happened. In his perspective, it felt like everything had flashed forward in a split second. It felt like he had skipped time. Michael's switch may have only frozen Arsene for less than a second. But it was enough to disable all of his abilities. Chapter 412, Incessant Metal Bug. Chapter 412, Incessant Metal Bug. Arsene looked around, realizing that his control over the splinters had ceased to exist. If he wanted to control them again, he needed to make contact with them on the ground. He looked at Michael, who remained completely uninjured compared to himself, who was inundated with bullet holes. An ability that can affect people and magnetics? A looming sense of defeat overcame his heart. As crazy as it may sound, he was going to lose to someone that was one stage lower than himself. Arsene had no other choice but to flee. Since his entire army had been completely wiped out by those people, he knew that even if he could somehow defeat the boy, he would have to deal with them as well. He willed the platform underneath his feet to shoot off into the distance, accelerating like a rocket. He swung his halberd simultaneously, engulfing the air that rushed past him with the red flames. He then controlled the air to propel him faster, hoping that he could run away from the golden-haired boy and his comrades. In just a matter of a few moments, he was able to cross the distance, leaving the battlefield fading in the background. A sense of relief washed over Arseny. Whiz! Arseny looked to the side and saw the same metal block keeping up with him. What the hell is this? He shouted. He swung his halberd, conquering the air and commanding them to form a wall of wind that protected him from the incessant metal bug. Just then, the metal block launched 2 consecutive switches towards Arseny. One of them stopped the air wall and the other attached itself to Arseny's chest. The man found himself frozen in time once again. A second later, Arseny overpowered the switch and regained control of his body. But not before a beam of Unity gun hit him on the right shoulder. Damn it! Arseny grumbled. Michael had already caught up with him because he was frozen for a second. Not only that, but Michael seemed to be accompanied by a weird metal monster as well. The drone flew close to Arseny, intending to launch another switch on his body. Learning from this mistake, Arseny didn't try to escape. He lunged forward, bringing his halberd into a 180-degree arc from behind him. The mithril relic's blade clashed with the drone, creating sparks that shot off from the point of impact. Arseny's face contorted as his muscles bulged. He was trying to overpower the drone, trying to spread the red flames to take over the metal bug for himself. But as soon as the flames tried to consume the drone, the power of Unity surged through it, deflecting the red flames and disintegrating it into pure energy. It didn't end there. As Arseny kept on pushing his halberd into the drone, the power from the collision started to create cracks under his weapon. No, Arseny tried to deny it, yet the cracks from his mithril relic were echoing in his ears as clear as day. The red halberd in his hands shivered for a moment before finally it exploded out into a million fragments. Its diminished power let out small bursts of lights before finally dissolving into nothingness. Arseny felt the weight of his weapon become as light as air. The world around him seemed to turn into slow motion as he saw his own mithril relic shatter into pieces. With no more weapon to focus the power of his diva, Arseny's flame lion soon shimmered in and out of existence before finally powering off. The platform underneath his feet finally gave, leaving Arseny plummeting to the ground. He crashed and tumbled onto the ground, breaking several of his bones. Yet, the pain of this moment could not overshadow the pain of losing his mithril relic. Completely battered, broken, and bruised, Arseny looked up at Michael as he slowly descended from the air. The drone floated towards Michael's palms before its propellers came to a stop and letting it fall gently onto his hand. I should have known, that's your mithril relic, Arseny said, coughing out blood. He should have found it weird that Michael had been fighting all this time without a visible weapon in his hands. You are an anomaly. Those were the words that fit Michael the most. His strange power that could defeat those a stage above himself and even the mithril relic that could somehow fly without any magic or aid. Tell me your secret. Arseny used the rest of his energy to prop himself up. How are you able to defeat me? How do you have a mithril relic that can fly? There are no such weapons in the world. But Michael stayed silent. Well, go on. Kill me then, he said to Michael. Michael looked down at Arseny. After seeing how your Flare Corp company heartlessly conquers towns and forces them to submit, you don't deserve a punishment of quick death. Arseny scoffs. That's the only way we could compete. There are other ways, Michael declared. And I'll show it to you. I will conquer the world, forcing no one to submit under my rule. A laugh almost breaks out from Arseny's mouth. Yet he saw that Michael was completely serious. There's no way you can do that. Michael shrugged. We'll see. I've proven you wrong once. I'll prove it again. And it was at that moment that Arseny felt a tug from his chest. It felt like something from inside his body was trying to get out. He looked down only to see that a liquid metal was seeping out of the bullet holes in his flaming orange armor. It took a second for him to realize what it was. Only when the first drop floated out of his body and started to burn into a white fire did Arseny finally realize what it was. It was a Godforge piece. More and more drops of liquid Godforge pieces flowed out of his body. No. What are you doing? Come back. Arseny tried to reach out to the droplets, but the white fire that consumed the Godforge pieces burned him to the touch. These drops floated forward, coming towards Michael's chest. And as it got closer and closer to him, its speed picked up before it eventually shot towards his heart like a bullet. Michael felt no pain from the Godforge piece. The liquid pieces continued to transfer out of Arseny's chest, leaving him weaker and weaker. Eventually, the last drop of Godforge left his body. His flaming lion diva roared out in defiance. But as that final drop left Arseny's body, the diva dispersed into the air like smoke, completely disappearing permanently. Arseny felt a void in his heart. Powerless. Meanwhile, Michael continued to absorb the Godforge pieces. Each drop covered more of his heart skin, allowing him to feel more connected with his diva. The robotic arm above him started to grow, completing the shoulders before it finally stopped. He absorbed the last drop of the Godforge pieces. Unfortunately, it was not enough to push him to the next level of the body formation realm. Arseny fell to the ground, completely shattered in body and in mind. He finally understood how Blazel could lose to a country bumpkin like him. Chapter 413, Spreading Mythos. Chapter 413, Spreading Mythos. As expected of boss. Jaka said, appearing as a streak of blue lightning beside Michael. Certainly, ho ho ho. I haven't seen anyone as powerful as he is, at least in the few seconds of memory that I have, ho ho ho. Michael didn't know if he should take that as an insult or a compliment. But knowing Grieve, he just probably said it without thinking. He had no brain after all. Master, these soldiers are going to be in prison, right? Can I please have them as my subordinates? Fudge said, hopping towards Michael with 100 zombified soldiers walking behind him. All of them were still connected to Fudge's shadow, which meant that they were still under an illusion. Fudge, remember what I said. You can't do that anymore. You'll have to recruit them after they are of sound mind. Fudge deflated, feeling disappointed. Ah! Bro Mike. That was so cool. Zion said, mimicking the moves Michael made during the fight. Even Michael's signature shrug was completely replicated by the young Dragonborn. So? What do we do now? Jakku asked. Do we just go home? Fudge and Zion immediately crossed their hands. No. Nah. When we go back, that white devil dragon is definitely going to punish us. We may as well keep away from her as late as possible, Zion insisted. Well, we have nothing more to do, Michael said. Unless. Michael and Fudge both made eye contact. There was a hidden connection between the two, a nonverbal conversation that was completely in line with each other. Unless we go after the rest of FlareCorp, Fudge said, rejuvenating back into a slime ball. Great idea. Zion jumped. There's still the one SD in command of the entire company. The leader. As soon as he said those words, Arseny immediately whipped his head up. He tried to stand up, but losing his diva not only completely exhausted him, but also exacerbated the injuries he sustained from the Unity gun. No, I can't let you guys meet with Flarexis. Everyone turned to look at Fudge, who was the sole investigator of this whole affair. Flarexis Oscorp is none other than the leader of FlareCorp, the ninja slime explained. No matter how injured or exhausted he was, Arseny picked himself up from the ground only to lose his footing and stumble backwards. I can't, in under no circumstances, let you meet our lord. He's the only hope of our company. I can't let you steal away his Godforge pieces. Arseny declared, staring at Michael. Although Flarexis was far stronger than Arseny in terms of power and ability, the 2ND in command wasn't willing to risk him meeting with Michael. The chance was small, but there was a probability that Michael could achieve victory against Flarexis, making him suffer the same fate as Arseny and Blazel, losing their diva in heartbreaking fashion. Arseny had a bad feeling about the meeting between the two. The worst part was that Arseny was sent here by Flarexis in order to consolidate their footing in the lower part of the Queen's region after they were being hunted down by the Legacies. It would only be a matter of time before Flarexis ended up coming to this part of the Queen's region and meeting with Michael. Arseny would rather his lord be captured by the Legacies. At least they were people bound by principle and rules. They couldn't just blindly kill someone like Flarexis to take the Godforge pieces in his heart. If that happened, then it was more than probable that their parent company, the conglomerates, would have to step in. But not Michael. He had shown that he could steal someone's Godforge pieces without surgery at all. This was a horrifying fact for all magnetics, no matter how strong they were. Unfortunately for Arseny, he had absolutely no strength left in his body. No. I can't. Zion swiped Arseny's chin with a swift jab, completely knocking the man out. Fudge then used his own shadow clone to wrap around Arseny and transfer him over to the Reborn prison where he belonged. Okay, peace and quiet, Fudge clapped his blobby hands in satisfaction. Now let's think about our next move in hunting down Flarexis. Michael was still high from the sensation of obtaining new Godforge pieces in his heart, so much so that he was completely hungry for more. But still, he didn't let himself get taken over by impulse. Fighting the main leader of a major company like FlareCorp was no easy task. They were just lucky that Arseny had only been dispatched to an isolated place here in the Queen's region with a small army for himself. They thought this was a simple reconnaissance mission to make contact with Blazel, not expecting that she was already defeated and that there was an ambush waiting at their arrival. This was good for Michael and the others because they were able to defeat them. But this meant that Flarexis probably had the rest of the FlareCorp soldiers under his command right now. Michael wouldn't be surprised if that number was in the high thousands. And if they charged into Batroc Town, guns blazing, with nothing but all 5 of them and no backup, even they would feel the pressure. So, if they were going to siege the walls of FlareCorp, then they better be ready. It's too dangerous to try and fight thousands of soldiers by ourselves, Michael said to them. I agree with Michael. Ho ho ho, I may have lost my memory, but I know a losing battle when I see one, Grieve said, having a strangely solemn look on his bone structure. The Dragonborns had no response for that. They knew they were still weak. This put a damper on their excited moods. But it seemed that Fudge wasn't worried about that at all. There's no worry about that, Fudge said, waving off their concerns. We don't have to deal with the soldiers. There's already a rebellion in Batroc Town waiting in the shadows to try for the right time to strike. Grieve immediately nodded, a memory being unlocked in his mind. Yes, a rebellion, ho ho ho. That will certainly even the odds between us. Meanwhile, Michael looked at Fudge, suspicious of the ninja slime. And how did you know there's going to be a rebellion in Batroc Town? Michael crossed his arms and stared at Fudge, waiting for his response. Fudge wriggled in place, uncomfortable. Master, FlareCorp has been terrorizing the town for months now. Maybe they finally had enough of it and wanted to fight for themselves. His master's stare never ceased, still suspicious of him. Okay, I may have heard that they all found the courage to revolt because of a certain religion that spread within its people. And what religion would that be, Fudge? The ninja slime put on the best innocent face he could. The Iron Maiden religion. Hestu, the former Flare Corp member turned into double agent for Fudge, had long infiltrated Batroc Town and had secretly organized religious gatherings in the shadows. There, Hestu went by the nickname, the Priest, and he told them all about the goddess deity made out of metal. All kinds of myths and legends were told about her, further making her mythos become established within the Batroc Town community. He made them believe that with her help, they could break free from the shackles of Flare Corp. Chapter 4:14, Batroc Town. Chapter 4:14, Batroc Town. As the time passed, more and more became members of this Iron Maiden religion. Not only that, but as Flare Corp became pressured by the legacies to stop their heinous acts of conquership, the more Flare Corp tightened their control on Batroc Town. This meant that more citizens felt angry with the way Flare Corp had been treating them. This only further pushed them into the arms of this new Iron Maiden religion that promised them a paradise of metals that was free from the hardships Flare Corp had done to them. Eventually, they had gathered enough members for a rebellion. All they needed now was a signal before they burst out of the shadows and stormed the castle gates. They were determined to kick Flare Corp out of their town. It didn't matter if they had to fight thousands of soldiers to do so. So the people believe that the Iron Maiden will help them become successful in their rebellion? Michael asked Fudge, who he knew to be the mastermind of all of this. Yes, master. And that will be us? What a coincidence. Haha, yes, master. And what would you do if we didn't show up? Fudge stood tall and proud. I would have asked you to help them, master. The ninja slime wasn't wrong. Michael would have definitely supported such rebellion against Flare Corp at some point in his expansion to the Queen's region. He just didn't like that Fudge had to use religion to do it. What did I tell you, Fudge? No illusions to make them believe something that isn't real. Fudge held out his blobby hands, trying to show his innocence. I didn't, master. I mean, the priest guy just told them that the Iron Maiden is real. It's true, right? She appeared. And who's to say she wasn't a goddess? Michael sighed. Technically, Fudge was right. And as long as he didn't deceive them or anything, then Michael didn't really care about what religion they believed in. Fine, he said, trying to brush past the topic. So, we'll show up in Batroc Town and start a rebellion. And then we'll use the chaos and hunt down Flarexes. Fudge nodded, excitement building up in his face. Yes, yes, master. Perfect plan. Hee. Yes. Another mission, which means more time away from my sis. Jacques said, locking shoulders with the others in celebration. Wait, he said to them. We should bring them all in on the plan. We'll need all the help we can get. Ah. Fudge, go back and tell them about it, Michael ordered. But it was just then that they heard the sound of rustling grass on the side. Too late. We already know, said Yuna as she came walking down with the rest of the girls behind her. Honey, I'm very disappointed that you went into a dangerous fight without warning me, Lilia said, sulking. Mom. Ahem, Lord Michael, it will be very advisable for you to give me notices on any change in your schedule. I am your secretary after all, Shiina said with an emotionless smile on her face. And you, my brothers, we'll talk later. Jakku and Zion felt their spines tingle. They felt like their lives were in danger. How did you even know we were here? Mihail asked them. Yuna pointed behind them where the two Shadow Orc chieftains were prostrating on the ground. Your mother is very persuasive, she said. Biyuta too. Forgive me, boss. Ratata. It is a disgrace, but we had no choice. She is a monster. Michael didn't even want to know what his mother did to make those proud orcs become like this. But since they were already here anyway, it was all good. He didn't waste any time and briefed them on the situation. Anyway, so here's the plan, he told them. Eventually, everyone found themselves transported inside the very walls of Batroc Town just a few minutes after their untimely reunion. And since Fudge had already spread his clones to all corners of the town months ago, Michael was able to use his shadow transportation skill to cover everyone within and teleport them to Fudge's clone in Batroc Town. Michael opened his eyes and immediately saw that they were in the middle of the town plaza. And everywhere he looked, he saw fire engulfing houses and burning constructs. Hay bales were ablaze, bridges were falling, and a huge smoke cloud was accumulating up in the air. Not only that, but there were fighting all around them. Normal citizens wearing nothing but leather armor and pitchforks fought against armored soldiers wearing the signature insignia of Flare Corp. The surprising thing was that the soldiers were losing. All around, he saw the bodies of unconscious Flare Corp soldiers and barely any civilians were among them. It seemed that the revolution had already started and they were winning too. What happened, Fudge? I thought you'd wait until we arrived before you started the rebellion. Fudge closed his eyes for a second as he connected with the thousands of clones he had all around the town. It wasn't long before he found out the reason for the early start of the rebellion. Master, someone already got here earlier than us. They've already arrived at the castle gates to try and defeat Flarexis and end his tyrannical rule on Batroc Town. Michael had a feeling he knew who they were. They must be from the legacies back in Metropolis. The atrocities that Flare Corp committed in Batroc Town were so bad that the legacies ended up forming a coalition, a temporary alliance from all their companies to try and stop all the evil deeds that Flarexis had been doing. In hindsight, Michael should have known he was late to the party. After all, a 2ND in command like Arseny wouldn't have been dispatched with only 500 soldiers with him if Flarexis wasn't already getting attacked by the coalition of the legacies. This was a joyous occasion, don't get it wrong. After all, the people of Batroc Town would finally be free from the tyrannical rule of FlareCorp. Not only that, but the threat to Angora City will finally have been defeated and Michael could expand his business without problem. However, Michael couldn't help but feel a little bit left out. In truth, he wanted to be the one to defeat Flarexis. But unfortunately, someone had already beaten him to the punch. Wait, so does that mean we won't get to fight? Zion grumbled. Don't be insensitive, Shiana said as she smacked him. While the young Dragonborn sulked at not being able to fight, Lilia took this opportunity to do a little bit of good deed mixed with advertisement. There's plenty of things for us to do, she said. For example, we can help the injured. Lilia approached the civilians on the ground and started to use earth healing magic on them. Don't worry. My son Michael will definitely fix up this whole place and build a better one, she promised them. Michael slapped his head. That's not the time to be doing this, Mom. Yes, yes. The Iron Maiden has helped improve your luck, dear citizens, Fudge declared. Praise be. Even Fudge was out of control. Michael would have reprimanded them, but there was other things on his mind. Despite everyone doing their best to help the injured, Michael couldn't help but look at the castle in the distance. Even from here, he could feel the echoes of a fight. Not just any fight, but a fight between magnetics. Chapter 415, Flarexis. Chapter 415, Flarexis. Michael decided to split off from the group and head on over towards the castle grounds. He floated over the entire town of Batroc, seeing all the chaos and the battlefield between the soldiers and the insurgents. It was clear that these citizens, although plenty brave, didn't defeat these soldiers all by themselves. He saw evidence of large magic spell residue in the air, something that was probably in the 5 to 6 star realm. Finally, he passed over the castle moat and ended up in its giant front doors. It was at that moment that the ground shook. He felt the propagation of power beneath his feet. This was not an earthquake. There wasn't any mana at all from this disturbance, meaning only one thing: this was due to an ability. Michael continued through the castle interior, passing by the burnt flags and paraphernalia of FlareCorp strewn about on the walls and up on the ceilings. As he came closer to the throne room, he noticed that there were a lot of life mana signatures in the room. Everyone was standing up. Meanwhile, there was only one person who was kneeling on the floor with his life mana slowly dwindling down. He pushed open the door, finally laying eyes on Flarexis FlareCorp. The man was in his mid-20s, with a fiery red hair that used to be slicked back with gel, but was now disheveled. Michael knew that he was the owner of FlareCorp because his face was depicted in all the paintings that he had passed through to get to the throne room. Flarexis was injured, with blood pooling on his feet. He was on the brink of defeat. Michael's eyes swept over the entire room, noticing 5 individuals standing around Flarexis in a circle, with 20 or so more people scattered about the room. He immediately knew that these 5 people were the one responsible for bringing down Flarexis to his knees. They weren't exhibiting any kind of strength or mana fluctuation for that matter, which only served to verify Michael's suspicions that they were magnetic. You people. And you pride yourselves as honorable. Is that what you call honor? Combining forces to defeat me, Flarexis denounced. One of the 5 people stepped forward. This man had long black hair, wearing gold jewelry and gold armor around his body. Judging from the fact that Flarexis focused his anger onto him, Michael guessed that this man was the leader of this entire group. We have rules, Flarexis. It's what makes us human. What you did to this town, what you did to its people. It's not human. We had to stop you. Flarexis spat on the man's shoes. Spare me the lecture, Alaric. You can only say that because you're at the top. But when I tried to claw my way up to your spot, you just had to bring me down. Alaric, the man with long black hair, shook his head in disappointment. I welcome a challenge. If you had played by the rules and not cheated, I would have graciously accepted my defeat. But you didn't, Flarexis. Meanwhile, the other 4 people beside Alaric seemed bored out of their minds. One of them sat on the ground, playing with his knife. The other read a book. One was leisurely laying on the ground while the last one was sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed. TSK. Damned legacies. I never liked all of you. Treating each other nicely, making friends. What bullshit. This is supposed to be a competition between us all. Flarexis ranted. We don't have to, Alaric retorted. Humph. You can only say that because you're up on your pedestal. It must be nice being the golden child, the prodigy, the insurmountable talent. Flarexis felt his anger rise up, and as it did, a figure slowly emerged from above him. Flames erupted, slowly forming the spherical structure of a fiery sun. But as Flarexis roared out his anger, more and more flames got added to the sun, creating a rotational movement within it. Anything that lays eyes on my sun will feel my wrath and suffer the heat of a star. A pillar of flares started to erupt from the poles of the sun, creating a replica of a quasar from deep in space. One could easily guess that Flarexis would be able to use the power of his quasar to empower himself. Michael looked at Flarexis Diva and gauged that he was probably in the 4th stage of body formation. This was verified by ChatJK4, who used a comparison of Michael's strength and extrapolated the result. If the 2 of them fought, Michael knew that it would be a hard battle. But still, he felt like had a good chance of winning, albeit maybe suffering a few injuries here and there. Please don't do this, Flarexis. Give up, Alaric warned. No. This world shall know the power of FlareCorp. Flarexis faced the ceiling, which had been blown wide open from their earlier fight. He stared at the sun, absorbing more power from it. His power kept rising, allowing his own diva to become inflated with power. In just a matter of a few seconds, Flarex's power bulged up to the 5th stage of body formation and had no signs of stopping. If Michael was the one fighting him, he would have already thrown out his switches to disrupt Flarex's ability and render his absorption useless. However, Alaric and the other 4 didn't seem to care at all as Flarexus became stronger. Alaric, according to our agreement, we only had to bring support. You have to finish him off yourself, said one of the legacies. You don't even need us here, said the other. I did my job. I helped the rebellion outside. That's my contribution. Alaric nodded to his temporary allies. He knew his role. He approached Flarexus and raised his hand. The emerald ring on his middle finger glowed with power, showing itself to be a mithril relic. As soon as the ring showed itself, a strange power seemed to propagate from Alaric's hand, reaching the fiery sun above Flarexus' body. The diva recoiled as if it had been hit by an invisible force. And suddenly, the fiery sun started to shimmer in and out of existence before finally dispersing like smoke blown by the wind. Michael couldn't believe what he saw. He didn't even see Alaric's diva. Yet somehow he was able to defeat Flarexus' fiery sun without any trouble. How strong is this guy? To be able to defeat a 4th stage body formation like Flarexus so easily must mean that Alaric's power was far beyond that. Not to mention, Flarexus' strength had probably reached above that of a 5th stage because of his sun absorption. He's in the 8th stage or probably 9th stage, Michael guessed. Flarexus coughed out blood. Damn it, he shouted in indignance. Just finish me off. I clearly am no match for you. I will not kill you. You deserve to go to jail and lose your company. That will be your punishment, Alaric declared. And what? Become the disappointment of Oscorp? I would rather die, Flarexus scoffed. And before anyone could even react, Flarexus' entire body started to glow with the same light as his fiery sun diva. In the next moment, Flarexus' body exploded, disintegrating his body and releasing a tremendous amount of energy inside the throne room. Chapter 416, Legacies. Chapter 416, Legacies. What is up with these people from the Oscorp family and their love for self-destruction? Michael complained. First Blazel, now Flarexus. The 2 cousins' first instinct upon defeat was to kill themselves. But that was not the time to contemplate about their weird family. The explosion was about to reach him. Michael was just a millisecond away from activating his diva and using one of his switches to save himself from the explosion. But just then he felt a very brief pulse of tremendous power coming from one of the people next to Alaric. The explosion that was supposed to have blown away the entire castle was suddenly rendered inert. Somehow, this person made Flarexus' self-destruction into nothing more than a flashbang. Whatever's left of him was now just a black explosive residue on the ground. Not even a single bit of his blood or flesh remained. As the aftermath of the explosion died down, Michael looked at the man who had stopped the whole castle from destruction. In that brief show of power, he realized that this person had a very powerful body formation cultivation. By his estimation, probably not lower than the 7th stage. Flarexus was never one to accept defeat. A shame, Alaric sighed. But now that the Flare Corp problem was solved once and for all, things could finally return to normal. Since they were the leaders of major companies back in Metropolis, the legacies were quick to finish their business and deal with the aftermath of the battle. Alaric turned to the civilians and the rebels in the throne room. This is now your territory, he said to them. You can elect your own government and decide for yourselves what you want to do. And once he said that, the civilians of Batroc Town heaved a sigh of relief. Michael was glad for them as well. Usually when a reigning company gets ousted from a territory, those that were the victor ended up conquering the territory for themselves. But Alaric had no intention of doing so, despite having every right to do so. This made him think of Alaric as an upstanding man. Eventually, one of the civilians raised up his pitchfork in the air and cheered. Freedom, he shouted. The rest of the civilians in the throne room shouted back at him, repeating his words. Praise be to the Iron Maiden. She has given us the Medal of Luck for this victory. Praise be to the Iron Maiden. Everyone chanted to the Iron Maiden's name, completely stupefying Alaric and the other outsiders. None of them had ever even heard of this religion before, but somehow it seemed to be extremely prevalent in this town. No one shall govern this town except for the Iron Maiden, the man declared, and the crowd cheered back at him. Alaric and the other legacies knew just how strategic this territory was, considering its location and proximity to Metropolis. So, they couldn't help but think that whoever was affiliated with this Iron Maiden religion would benefit greatly from this town. Anybody heard of this religion before? One of them asked. Alaric, is it someone you know? Alaric shook his head. I have no idea. They have quickly taken over this territory with their ideology of this new Iron Maiden. It's very impressive. Whoa. Big praise from you. While the legacies talked amongst themselves and while the locals celebrated with each other, Michael was left alone on the edge of the throne room's doorway. He blended perfectly with the crowd. Fudge suddenly jumped up from the shadows beside Michael, plopping above Michael's head. Good. You're here. Yes, master? Michael pointed at the legacies in front of him. What can you tell me about them? That's easy, master. These people introduced themselves to the locals upon their arrival, so I was able to easily pick up the pieces and put them all together. That one right there is Alaric Goldstone, Fudge said, pointing to the long black-haired man with his locks flowing down to his shoulders. He's from the Gilderan Company, a subcompany of the conglomerate Goldstone. Fudge then pointed to two people standing beside Alaric. Those two guys are Alaric's subordinates. The man on the right of him who had short green hair and a sheathed katana on his back, his name is Perseus. It looks like he's the right-hand man of Alaric, Fudge guessed. Michael recognized Perseus as the one who had stopped the explosion from creating any real damage to the throne room. Master, that man on the left of Alaric is Orion. Fudge pointed at the man who was still laying on the ground, completely disinterested with whatever was happening. Next, Fudge pointed to the pink-haired girl with a ponytail and a short skirt reading a book. She's called Aerith. She's from the conglomerate Sinclair's Elixir, acting as the CEO of all their operations in Metropolis. If it wasn't for his tall height, then Michael would have mistaken him for a dwarf. That is Bobby. He's from the Quench Company, a sub-company of the Hephaestus conglomerate. Three of them were from the same company, Gilderan, which was headed by Alaric Goldstone. The other was from Sinclair's Elixir, and the last one was from Hephaestus Company. This meant that Alaric, Aerith, and Bobby were the actual legacies, the inheritors from the top conglomerates. But from what Michael recalled in his conversation with Cerberus, there were 5 of them in total. The fourth one must have been Phlerexus before he was ousted. This meant that there was one last member of the legacies that wasn't present here. This ends our coalition, Aerith said to Alaric. Yes. Thank you for your help, Alaric told her. I really appreciate you for coming. Alaric turned to Bobby. And thank you too, Bobby. The weapons and armors ended up saving a lot of civilian lives. Bobby approached Alaric and gave him a big hug. No problem, man, he said before turning to leave. Now that their coalition was done, there was no more need for them to cooperate with each other. I'm sure you've heard the rumor, Aerith said, looking at Alaric with deep eyes. They said that another vial's going to be up on auction soon. I need that, Bobby grunted. My mithril artifact needs another coat of Sue. Aerith laughed. Well, good luck to us both, Bobby. Let's pray that we can save up enough money to put up a decent fight against Alaric this time. You jest, Alaric waved them off. I would struggle to win the auction against you both as well. Michael realized that although they were legacies, they were quite friendly with each other, a complete opposite of Flarecorp and Phlerexus. But of course, that didn't mean that there was no competition amongst them. And it looks like this time they were competing to get a vial of the spirit of old. He immediately asked ChatJK4 to give him a mental note about it. He definitely would give Metropolis a visit now after he heard this. Aerith then turned to look at where Phlerexus exploded. It's just a shame about those Godforge pieces, she sighed. She knew that the explosion turned those metals into tiny pieces far too small to even see with the naked eye. There was no way it could be surgically placed to someone else now. Chapter 417, Legacies Meet Reborn. Chapter 417, Legacies Meet Reborn. Of course, Aerith would have never thought that she was in the presence of a natural magnetic. That was still a myth in her mind. The Godforge pieces are a lost cause. But we still have a problem, ladies and gentlemen. There is still one person on the loose, their 2ND in command, Arseny, Alaric warned. Bobby crossed his arms, deep in thought. How strong is he again? Perseus, the right-hand man of Alaric, answered that question. He's in the 3rd stage of body formation. He is strong enough to wreak havoc in the Lower Queen's region, particularly Angora City and even the King's region. If left on his own for too long, he could end up gathering his own forces and launching a counterattack on us. That is a problem, Aerith pondered. That place is devoid of any magnetics. He'll be able to rain terror over there with no one to stop him. The legacies knew just how strong an ability was in the right hands, and they knew how much destruction someone with a vendetta could do. They thought that once Arseny found out his liege died, then he would do everything he could to seek revenge. And this was a problem for the legacies because it would disrupt the normal flow of life, and that meant losing profits. I call dibs on defeating Arseny, Bobby blurted out. You can't just call dibs on that, Aerith retorted. Alaric shook his head, feeling a headache coming on. We're going to have another week-long meeting about this, aren't we? Even their plan of defeating Phlerexus took them months to decide. But it was not because their plan was too complex, but because they didn't know how they were going to divide the burden and the profits. For example, now that Flarecorp has disbanded, their territory in Metropolis was currently up for grabs. But the legacies decided to evenly distribute it amongst them all. But of course, they had to argue for months before that was decided. Aerith decided to stop arguing with Bobby over this. Whatever, she said, turning away from him. She then walked over to the Batroc town locals who had been cleaning up the mess now that the war was over. Good citizens of Batroc. I propose to establish an apothecary here in this town, managed by none other than me. It will help you all recover from the fight, she announced. Seeing this, Bobby also took the chance to advertise his own company. I offer smithing and metal services as well, he said, showing off his great chestplate. Alaric didn't get left behind. My company offers a variety of services and goods. Our trade routes make it so that we provide everything and anything. The legacies didn't just treat this as another business opportunity, but as a way to help Batroc Town get back up to their feet. With their resources, with their connections, the citizens of Batroc Town would find it extremely easy to rebuild their own town into something even better than the original. One of the old men leading the rebellion walked up to the legacies with his straw hat in hand. I apologize, great heroes. But we have already found our new sponsor. The legacies were quite surprised by this. They had just liberated the town just a few minutes ago and yet somehow had already gotten to them? This was quite absurd to think about. Who is it? Aerith asked. The local looked up at the skies with zeal and patriotism in his eyes. It's the Reborn Company. They are the ones blessed by the Iron Maiden. We long to get our hands on their metal automobiles and treat it as our sacred animal. The legacies looked at each other, confusion painted on their faces. It was clear that none of them had ever heard of this company before. The Reborn Company certainly wasn't located in Metropolis or further north of the Queen's region because they would have heard about this company by now. Can you tell us where this Reborn Company is located? Alaric asked. According to the holy texts spread around, the Reborn Company had their humble start in the King's region. But through the grace of the Iron Maiden, they were able to expand in Angora City and beyond. And we shall be the next one to receive the Iron Maiden's blessings. The locals kneeled down and prayed up to the skies, seemingly grateful for the Iron Maiden. A company from the King's region was able to expand in Angora City? Alaric said, pondering with an amazed expression on his face. That's pretty impressive, Aerith commented. I didn't know exciting things were happening in the south. Meanwhile, Bobby was more interested in the metal automobile. In his mind, he couldn't understand how something metal could be likened to an animal. They have reached the 450th ranking of 450th in the Golden 500. And we are confident that we shall be taken along as they advance even further up the ladder, praised the Batroc town local. Now, this fact was truly surprising for the legacies. They would have never thought that a company in the King's region could even break through the rankings, let alone reach the 450th spot. Just then, one of the locals finally turned his head and noticed a certain golden-haired boy standing by the doorway. The man's eyes widened as he realized who he had just seen. That's him. It's as the holy texts say. He's the bearer of the metal animals, the leader of Reborn, Boss Michael. All the locals turned their heads immediately, seeing Michael just a few meters away from them. They quickly swarmed towards him, treating him as if he was the one that saved them and not the legacies. And it was just then that the legacies finally looked at the supposed leader of the Reborn Company. Their eyes turned into one of confusion and shock. How could that be, they thought? Michael was barely a teen. And yet, he was the one who created the Reborn Company who was able to reach the 450th spot. They thought he would be older, much more wizened. They never expected a literal child. They knew just how complicated it was to build a company and much more to let it become a top company in the world. Yet somehow a child was able to do it, and from the King's region, no less. Alaric, Aerith, and Bobby looked at Michael, trying to see if they recognized his face. But they didn't. He wasn't part of the inner circles of inheritors from major conglomerates. Excuse me, you're the owner of Reborn? Alaric asked, approaching Michael. Michael sized up the guy before nodding. Yes, I am. And you're part of the legacies. Alaric put his hand on his chest and bowed as a sign of greeting. That is right. It's a pleasure to meet someone as talented as you. Hey, I'm Aerith. I'm a grandchild of Sinclair, she butted in, and Michael greeted her too. The name's Bobby. If you have any metallurgy needs, you can hit me up, he said. Michael greeted the legacies and found them to be very agreeable, not like Flarexis and Flarecorp. These three leaders were very nice despite their high stature. Chapter 4:18, Pity. Chapter 4:18, Pity. It's very impressive to see someone as young as you achieve a ranking in the Golden 500, Alaric praised Michael. I have very good friends and allies, he replied. The three immediately smiled. Just from that one sentence alone, they knew that he wasn't arrogant or selfish like Flarexis. Michael was very humble despite how great his achievement was. Well, I hope that you will take good care of Batroc Town. They will need a lot of renovation to repair the damage that Flarecorp has done, Alaric said, giving him a piece of advice. Don't worry about that. We'll have them up and running within 2 weeks, Michael promised. The legacies chuckled, thinking that Michael was joking. After all, if they had been the one tasked with the job to restore the town, it would take them half a year at the least. So, in their minds, Michael was clearly exaggerating this time frame. But of course, Michael wasn't kidding. ChatJK4 already gave him an estimate with their tools and their resources, and it would only take about 2 weeks or so. Well, if you're ever planning on visiting Metropolis, then you should come by my company and I can help you settle in, Alaric offered. Or if you want this town to have a proper apothecary for once, then you can talk to me and we'll arrange for a branch here to be made. Of course, for a good price, hiya. Aerith laughed as she put Michael's head in a lock on her arm, making him feel a very soft sensation. Michael blushed as he slipped away from Aerith's grasp. It's not safe to be wearing just leather armor. So if you go to our company, I'll give you a customized armor set as a gift, Bobby said, smiling and showing his uneven teeth. Wow, you didn't even offer me that, Alaric complained. You're an adult. He's a kid, Bobby said. So Michael, what do you think? As grateful as he was to be given a gift, Michael was already satisfied with his current armor. And no offense to Bobby, but Michael was pretty sure that the dwarves could give him better armor if he needed one. No thanks. Suit yourself, Bobby shrugged. Just then, Michael looked down at his shadow and felt something tug. A disembodied voice rang throughout his head. Master, we're heading back to Angora City. Shiana insists on arranging the transport of goods in Batroc Town as soon as possible. Shiana didn't waste any time and immediately went back to their headquarters to send in engineers and construction workers for the town repair. Not only that, but she even arranged for food and supplies to be carried with it so that the locals would have something to eat. Michael didn't mind that they left him behind. He knew that they needed to do this in order to secure their position in town and officially mark it as their territory. All right. I'll be right there, he replied to Fudge. He then turned to the legacies and bid them goodbye. I have a few things to take care of, so I'll be leaving early. All right. We'll be leaving soon as well. And remember, if you need any help, just reach out to me in Metropolis, Alaric said. Michael nodded before turning around and leaving the castle. Only when he was far enough away did he use his shadow skill to teleport away. Meanwhile, Alaric, Aerith, and Bobby both looked at the door with warm smiles on their faces. Do you remember when we were just a kid like him? Alaric asked. Yeah, I remember when I first started my company. It was so exciting, Aerith dozed off as she reminisced. Do you think he could go further? Bobby's question made the two of them sigh. Probably not, said Alaric. As cruel as it is, no normal human could ever hope to achieve a ranking above that of the 400th spot. He'll need to be magnetics like us. The reason why they were so nice to Michael was because deep down they felt sorry for him. Although he achieved great results in the King's region and even in Angora City, they knew that he wouldn't be able to compete with the stronger companies in Metropolis and further beyond. The only reason they were able to reach the very top spot in Metropolis was because they had special abilities that other people didn't. They had divas. And to awaken a diva, one needed to have a Godforge piece. That was already hard enough. After all, Godforge pieces were either only handed down through inheritance or found at tombs and discoveries throughout the land. And if someone were to obtain one through great luck and fortune, they would have to be able to afford the services of someone like Aerith, who could surgically place the Godforge piece in their heart. And that didn't even end there. One would also need a mithril relic to use their diva. Although more common than Godforge pieces, mithril relics were still considered rare treasures with huge price tags. After that, one needed to have money and luck to obtain Spirit of the Old or Su. And that was just getting a foot in the door of becoming a magnetic. If one wanted to continuously improve their cultivation, they needed to obtain more Godforge pieces and more Su. Becoming a magnetic came with a huge price tag, one that only inheritors and conglomerates could afford. So, they thought that Michael had no chance of becoming successful past Angora City. This wasn't out of maliciousness, but that was just the reality of it all. We still need to talk about Arseny, Alaric said, his tone becoming more serious. It is very likely that Arseny is going to set his sights on the Reborn company, seeing that it has reached the 450th spot. That damn roach. We have to get rid of him. I really like that Michael kid, Aerith fumed. We have to move now or else that kid's going to get destroyed, Bobby agreed. They would feel very sorry if they found out that Arseny killed Michael and took over Reborn for himself. They thought that the Reborn company had probably reached its peak in Angora City. It was already Michael's great misfortune that he wasn't a magnetic, so they didn't want Arseny to add to that back luck. Excuse me, great heroes? One of the locals couldn't help but interject in their conversation. What is it? Alaric asked. I just want to tell you that the great demon Arseny has already been vanquished. The three legacies quickly questioned the local. What? Where did you hear about that? How did you know? That can't be true. The local innocently nodded his head. I am not lying, great heroes. Arseny has truly been bested. You can even look at the victory spoils. He then led the legacies out of the castle and into the main plaza where a bunch of people were gathered in a circle and celebrating. Look, that is Arseny's armor and his clothes. Alaric and the rest of them couldn't believe their eyes. They recognized that armor. They wouldn't mistake it for somebody else. Aerith looked at the armor using magic to confirm if it was genuine or not. That's his, she realized. That's Arseny's armor. This made them realize that Arseny had truly been defeated. How else would someone be able to get his armor? Chapter 419, Going Back for Loot. Chapter 419, Going Back for Loot. The only way someone could beat a third-stage body formation magnetic like Arseny was if they had a magic realm of 7-star or higher. But that was just the theoretical idea. Real-life fighting was much more complicated, and a magnetic could easily overpower an 8-star realm magician if they used their abilities correctly. The only one who could have defeated him was Cerberus Augentore, an 8-star tower master back in the King's region. But from what they knew, Arseny hadn't left the Queen's region as of yet, so he couldn't have encountered someone as strong as Cerberus. Could this be a hoax? Bobby asked. Maybe he purposefully left his armor so that he could escape. The other two nodded, feeling that this was the most logical explanation as to what had happened. It was that, or there was a third stage or higher magnetic in the lower Queen's region. But that was very much unlikely. For someone to defeat Arseny, they would have needed 3 surgeries. I definitely haven't seen someone like that in recent times, Aerith commented. She would know that because the only ones who could perform the surgery was her and her team of healers back in Metropolis. In short, all of the magnetics were accounted for, and all of them were back further north of the Queen's region. I'll keep my eye out, Alaric said. I'll try to contact Duke Stelmane of Angora City to warn him of Arseny's plans. If need be, then I will send my troops there to support. But for now, we'll wait and see. The other two agreed with Alaric and settled the matter there. And since they didn't have much to do anymore, they went on their own ways and separated, leaving to go back to Metropolis. Meanwhile, back in Angora City, Michael met up with the others now that the business with Flare Corp was over. Shiina and Castell worked together to arrange for supplies to be shipped out to Batroc Town as soon as possible. However, since the path was still rough and had no golden road, their estimated time of arrival would probably be a week or more. Master. Those 3 people were quite strong, Fudge said, popping out of the shadows and onto Michael's head. Yup. They're called legacies for a reason. They're the top businesses in Metropolis, which means that they're all probably ranked in the 300 to 200 range. Not only that, but they were very strong magnetics as well. He didn't know about the other 3 legacies, but he sure knew that Alaric was at least at the very peak of body formation. Defeating Phlerexus without showing his diva or using his ability was a flex that only the best of the best could showcase. Fudge, I hope that you didn't try and put your shadows onto them, right? He gave Fudge a stern look. No, master. I swear. Those guys were just way too strong that I knew my shadows would immediately get found out if I attached it to them. Being magnetic came with a lot of perks, one of them being that Fudge couldn't prank them. Speaking of which, master, can I become a magnetic? Fudge put himself in front of Michael and did the best, soft, eyes that he could muster. He even molded his body to have a tail on his back, mimicking a very good dog. But of course, Michael wasn't going to get swayed by Fudge. He would be far too unstoppable if he became a magnetic. Nope. I'll be taking all the Godforge pieces first, he declared. He didn't even know if monsters or demi-humans could become a magnetic. For all he knew, only humans could become one. After all, Godforge pieces attached themselves to the heart, something which Fudge didn't have. In the future though, he wouldn't mind Fudge or his other allies becoming a magnetic if that was possible. He just wanted to be as efficient as possible for now and hog all the Godforge pieces they could find. It wasn't out of greed, but out of necessity. The stronger of a magnetic he became, the more secure they could become as a company. Speaking of which, Michael just remembered something. I have something to do. Tell everyone I'll be back before dinner, he said to Fudge. Michael immediately turned himself into a shadow and transported himself back to Batroc Town. Coming back here a day later, he saw that the entire town was just starting to get back on their feet. They were sweeping the streets, clearing burned debris, and overall just getting back on their feet. But strangely though, their main priority wasn't rebuilding homes or recreating infrastructure. The citizens of Batroc Town instead focused on creating a giant statue of the Iron Maiden in the very middle of their plaza. It was about 20 feet tall and strangely accurate to the Iron Maiden that he saw back then. Why is it so accurate? They weren't even there? Michael just had to attribute it to Fudge doing Fudge things. He was starting to understand why Fudge's talent was called the SSS-class Malevolent Passenger. The slime was truly malevolent. Ah! The Holy Son Michael. One of the locals spotted Michael and immediately kowtowed on the street. And as soon as the other people heard this, they immediately bowed down on the street as well, showing their respect to Michael. Whoa. What are you all even talking about? He asked them. It is you who has brought us the knowledge of the Iron Maiden. It is also you who will bring her image to the world. Who are you if not the Holy Son of the Iron Maiden? The other citizens nodded fervently, agreeing with the man's words. Michael shook his head. He didn't even want to deal with what Fudge had cooked up here. Just so you guys know, I'm not the Holy Son or whatever. The locals didn't seem to hear his words though. Michael didn't want to be here when the Reborn trucks arrived with supplies. They would surely be more fervent in their worship because of that, saying that he brought them the holy animals of the Iron Maiden. He quickly floated away from the growing group of locals and went directly towards the castle. Nothing much had changed with this structure, probably because no one knew what to do with it. After all, FlareCorp had completely erased all the royal blood in Batroc Town, and now that they're gone, there's no one left to rule them, which meant that the castle was vacant. He went directly to the throne room where the self-destruction of Phlerexus took place and where he met the 3 legacies. Stepping into the middle of the room, he found himself surrounded by burned blast marks. There was nothing left of Phlerexus but these black streaks on the ground. However, he knew that even if blood, flesh, and bone were destroyed, there was one thing in Phlerexus' body that would never be destroyed. And that was his Godforge piece. Aerith said that the Godforge pieces were too separated to even see with the naked eye, therefore almost impossible to pick up. But Michael had no problem with that. Chapter 420, Single Chest. Chapter 420, Single Chest. He didn't have to pick them up. All he had to do was let them come to him. In all the cases that he obtained a Godforge piece, they would always come to him involuntarily, shooting off to his chest like a bullet. He was hoping that it would be like that as well. So he closed his eyes and relaxed all his muscles as he waited for the Godforge pieces to come to him naturally just like before. But no matter how much he concentrated, nothing happened. It has been noted that manifesting your diva allows you to connect more with your Godforge pieces. It is possible that doing so will allow your natural magnetism to become enhanced enough to attract the separated Godforge pieces. Good advice, he said to ChatJK4. As he connected with the Godforge pieces in his heart, the image of the futuristic robotic hand appeared hovering above him. The diva in his hand floated in the air, inactive, just like it had always been. But this time, the diva seemed to have sensed something within the room to cause it to stir. It spread its fingers and turned its palms upside down as if feeling something on the ground. And it was at that moment that Michael felt a slight reverberation on the floor. It was subtle, but it was there. Microscopic particles of the Godforge were slowly unearthing themselves from all over the room. These pieces were so small that they just passed right through the solid walls. And as they came closer to the center of the room, particles started to collide with each other and unite into bigger pieces. As Michael's diva summoned more and more of these particles, they combined large enough to become small pellets that floated in the air. The white flame of these God-forged pieces became large enough for Michael to see, giving him a once-in-a-lifetime visual of millions of little white lights gathering towards him. Eventually, the particles swirled around Michael, creating the visual effect of a galaxy swirling around Michael, or more accurately, around his diva. And just like a real galaxy, the closer things were to the center, the faster their rotation became. As particles came closer and closer, they finally reached the point of no return, shooting off towards Michael's heart as if they had just entered the event horizon of a black hole. Michael closed his eyes and let the God-forged pieces come to him. More and more areas of his heart became enshrouded with the God-forged pieces, fully forming the upper half of his heart. The God-forged pieces continued to spiral until finally they were all absorbed into Michael's body. The moment created complete silence. Michael stood in place as the God-forged pieces continued to surround his heart. At the very same time, his diva above him started to grow. But strangely, the formation didn't start at the very top of the shoulders. It started on the other side, forming the second hand. What seemed like nanoparticles manifested out of nowhere and started to form into 5 fingers. It formed the metal veins, the circuitry, and eventually the black outer shell of the hand. The formation continued, with more and more nanoparticles appearing and forming the rest of the hand until eventually it stopped at the very elbow of the hand. His diva now had the complete right hand and a half left hand. Finally, Michael felt the power in his heart start to settle. The new God-forged pieces had successfully integrated itself with his body without any problems. There was a certain feeling of accomplishment in his mind, a feeling of completing a goal. Just from intuition alone, he felt that he had advanced into the 3rd stage of body formation. ChatJK4, can you confirm? By comparing you to Arseny and Phlerexus, it is safe to say that your diva has advanced enough to reach the 3rd stage of body formation with a 95% certainty. I need more information to completely conclude this conjecture. Michael could understand why ChatJK4 was feeling not so certain about it. After all, Phlerexus was in the 4th stage of body formation. And if Michael had absorbed all of his God-forged pieces, and he thinks he did, then by all means he should have also reached the 4th stage of body formation. However, he found out early on that he required much more God-forged pieces than the normal magnetic. So he couldn't really fit into their standards. Either way, Michael was more than satisfied with this breakthrough. He was just about to leave when one of the locals came in and saw Michael. "Oh, holy son. We didn't know you were here." More locals stepped into the throne room, carrying brooms and other such cleaning materials. "I was just about to leave," he said to them. "I see. Well, I hope that you will visit Batroc town soon because we are about to turn this entire castle into the very first church of the Iron Maiden," the local said with crazy fervor in his eyes. Michael sighed. "Well, it's your town," he said begrudgingly. And just as he was about to leave, one of the locals revealed something to him. "Holy son, we hope that you empty out the evil Phlerexus room out on the edge of town. We're not confident that we can disable the traps there." Michael looked at them, confused. "I thought that this was Phlerexus' room. He has another secret underground room just beneath the walls. He rarely visits it, but one of them almost died when he tried to enter," the local said. This was very interesting. "Another secret room? What kind of treasures does Phlerexus have in there?" Michael asked for the directions and the locals immediately guided him there. After floating for a minute, he reached the southern side of the wall where there was a trap door beside some bushes. It looked like it had previously been hidden underground since there were still some pebbles and soil on top of it. He opened the hinged door with a wooden ladder leading him down a dark underground tunnel. With his supreme skill, he was able to see a trap at the very first step towards the tunnel. If he stepped onto that plate, it would lead to arrows shooting off from the sides. Michael, being the lazy guy that he was, carelessly stepped foot inside the tunnel, causing arrows to fire in his direction. Just then, a prismatic shield appeared around his skin and protected him from the poison-tipped arrows. He continued to walk through the tunnel with more and more arrows shooting at him from the sides until he eventually found himself in a small empty room filled with just a single wooden box. "This is the treasure room? Just a single chest?" he asked, a bit disappointed. Even when looking through the walls, he saw nothing but earth and soil, meaning that this was the end of the tunnel. But seeing as Phlerexus took this much effort to hide the single wooden chest, Michael felt that there had to be something special hidden inside. After making sure that there was no trap inside the chest, Michael tore the locks away and immediately opened the box. "Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today.